2019 already. And request a roll call, please.
Mayor Tim Knapp.
Here.
Councillor Kristen Ackerball. Here. Councillor Charlotte Lehan. Councillor Susie Stevens.
Here.
Councillor Ben West. Andrew Carr.
Here.
Paul Bunn.
Here.
Arthur Park.
Here.
Bill Amadon.
Here.
Daphne LaGarza.
Here.
Thank you. And as is our tradition, I would invite you to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I wanted to say welcome to our newest member, Daphne LaGarza. And Daphne, would you like to just tell people a little bit, your brand new appointee, and who you are and how you arrived in Wilsonville, or something brief?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Daphne LaGarza, and I relocated to the Pacific Northwest about 3 years ago. I originally came from Las Vegas, Nevada, and I worked for a large municipality in Las Vegas, Nevada for approximately 20 plus years, 26 years. I currently work with the Traffic Information Council. We work out of Salem, and we oversee a lot of the rest areas throughout the state of Oregon, and I'm excited to be here and on the Budget Committee.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for joining us. I, first of all, would be open to a motion on order of agenda. If anyone would like to make a motion.
Your Honor, I move that we approve the order of agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That then brings us to our first order of business, which is to elect a Budget Committee Chair. Mr. Carr, here to my left, has been our chair for 2 years?
Maybe.
Trying to think. And multiple meetings, and I think I understand that you would be willing to continue in that capacity if it pleased the committee.
If it pleases the committee.
Is there anyone else that would like to make an alternative motion for other than Mr. Carr, or put their own name in the hat? Would anyone like to make a motion to elect Andrew Carr for this year's
budget? I move
budget?
to elect Andrew Carr as chairman of the Budget Committee for this budget cycle.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
He's a good man.
All right, I know that's true. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Mr. Carr, I will hand you the gavel
right, thank
and
you.
the meeting if you wish. Thank you.
So the first thing we need to do is a motion to approve the Budget Committee as published, the three last meetings, which was May 30th of 2018, June 6th of 2018, and June 6th of 2018 for both the city budget and the Urban Renewal Agency. So
Do we all have those?
they were emailed to us.
Emailed, all right, they're not in front of us, okay.
So do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Next agenda item is the state shared revenue. We'll have a short presentation from our finance staff before opening the public hearing. I call to order the Wilsonville Budget Committee public hearing on the possible uses of state shared revenues as reflected in the City of Wilsonville's fiscal year 2019-2020 proposed budget. Ladies and gentlemen, the Budget Committee will be taking public testimony tonight at a public hearing. If you wish to testify, please complete a speaker card on the table at the entrance of the room and give it to the recording secretary, Paula. When you are called to testify, come to the front of the room and sit at the microphone facing the committee. Begin your testimony by stating, "For the record, my name is." After stating your name, Either state your address or, if for privacy reasons you do not wish to publicly state your address, state that your address is as written on the speaker card submitted for the record. Please note that your testimony card is public record and therefore your name and address are part of the public record and available for public inspection. I request from those providing testimony not to repeat testimony that has already been given to the committee. Simply indicating you agree with the previous speaker's testimony is sufficient. Is there anyone wishing to testify? Do we have any speaker cards? Okay. Thank you. The public hearing on the possible uses of state shared revenues as reflected in the City of Wilsonville's fiscal year 2019-2020 proposed budget is now closed. But when are they presenting? Yeah, we should have them present. I think that'd be a good idea.
Roll there.
Yeah, I was on a roll.
Blazer game.
Pleasure. Wow.
We're all distracted.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Rodacher, and I'm the City Finance Director. And this evening, I have with me Keith Kako, who is our Assistant Finance Director. And we'll be tag teaming throughout the presentation, so you don't hear one of us talking all night long. First of all, I would like to apologize to everybody in this room. When I set up these meetings in January, it never occurred to me that it would be the second meeting of the Western, Conference Championship. So, next year I know better to see if I can work out that schedule. And I think if we go to Game 7 on both of them, then we won't have anything to interfere with our Tuesday, the 28th meeting. So we can just have to wait and see how that one goes. According to ORS 221.760, we are required to have a public hearing to recognize the revenues and to give us authorization to spend state shared revenues. In order to qualify, a municipality must provide at least 4 of the services that are noted on the bottom of the screen. And of course, we do 6 of them. The only one that we do not provide is a fire protection. The revenues we'll be receiving are approximately $1.8 million for our gas tax. That is our primary funding source for our road operating fund. And then we have approximately $700,000 that will be recorded in the general fund. And that includes our liquor and cigarette tax and a revenue called state revenue sharing. These taxes are all collected by the state and allocated to municipalities based on the population for each city. And that is the information I have for state shared revenues.
Any questions? Mayor Knapp.
Thank you. Ms. Rodacher, are these trending in any significant direction, up or down, or what are we seeing and what are we expecting in the next few years?
And the gas tax, actually, we were discussing this earlier. There was in HB 2017, they actually adopted a rate increase trail that was 2%. It went up 4 cents a gallon. And then in 2022 and 24, it will each go up 2 cents a gallon. They're going forward. So there's a total approved of a 10-cent increase with that bill. The liquor and the cigarette and state shared revenue are just pretty much, small incremental changes every year. No big jumps.
As we grow.
Right.
So do you know, can you project, like for the 4 cents, is that showing up yet? Is it, something that we're budgeting larger numbers for?
We would have been receiving that this year.
Okay.
So the year-end estimates would be.
So it's up from last year?
A little bit, yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And we do get to count the gated
Yes.
community,
Yes, we do.
Coffee Creek.
Yeah, Coffee Creek is considered a part of our population in the calculation for the distribution of these revenues.
So should I come back to this? Back to the top. Okay.
Citizens Academy.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Is there anyone wishing to testify for the public hearing for the proposed fiscal year budget, state revenue sharing, or any other citizen input at this time? I see nothing. Thank you. The public hearing on the possible uses of state shared revenues as reflected in the City of Wilsonville's fiscal year 2019-2020 proposed budget is now closed. The next agenda item, the public hearing and requesting citizen input. Budget message. I call to order the Wilsonville Budget Committee public hearing on the City of Wilsonville's fiscal year 2019-2020 proposed budget. So I got to go through this. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, the Budget Committee will be taking public testimony tonight at the public hearing. If you wish to testify, please complete a speaker card on the table at the entrance to this room and give it to the recording secretary. When you are called to testify, come to the front of the room and sit at a microphone facing the committee. Begin your testimony by stating, "For the record, my name is." After stating your name, either state your address or, if for privacy reasons you do not wish to publicly state your address, state that your address is as written on the speaker card submitted for the record. Please note that your testimony card is public record, and therefore your name and address are part of the public record and available for public inspection. I request from those providing testimony not to repeat testimony that has already been given to the committee. Simply indicate you agree with the previous speaker's testimony is sufficient. Is there anyone wishing to testify? And did we have any speaker cards? Thank you. The public hearing on the City of Wilsonville's fiscal year 2019-2020 proposed budget is now closed. Now we turn it over to the finance staff for the budget message and presentations. Take it away, Ms. Rodecker and Mr. Ketko.
Okay, I'll get this started off. Hope everyone had a chance to read the budget message. There are a lot of numbers in this budget book, so we're going to attempt to put some of that into context here tonight. As related in the budget message, there are three primary goals of this budget. One, the first is to provide for a well-maintained infrastructure. The city already has ownership of approximately $377 million worth of assets on our balance sheet. The second goal of this budget is to ensure a safe environment. Public safety is always one of the deep purposes of local government. And then finally, enhance livability to the community. But really, distilled down a little bit even further than that, it's about protecting the value and economic condition of the community, as well as advancing the value proposition of living here. And that value proposition is determined by council, and it's tied to the key performance areas. And those are outlined on page 4. We've included those in the budget book. So a little budgetary background before we go too far into this. In terms of fund accounting, every fund has its own budget, and the city has 24 funds. Every fund has one story, and that's basically accountability. Specifically for the resources of those funds, because each resource in those funds is limited or restricted by statute, code, or council directive. So the funds are really set up for accountability. The third thing to keep in mind here at the city is it's at the program level within each fund at which the budget is appropriated. And the program expenditures are outlined in your budget book starting on page 73. And those are all the departments of the city. HR, finance, the library, et cetera, et cetera. For the purposes of program expenditures, capital projects are also considered a program expenditure, debt service and contingencies, as well as interfund transfers. So those are all, that's the budget level of the budget here. So the city has 24 budgeted funds, 11 operating funds. And these are the funds for the day-to-day operations of the organization. It's what keeps the lights on, pays the salary, provides the service. There's 7 governmental type funds we have here and 4 business type, which are sometimes referred to as enterprise funds. Those are the funds. There are utility funds. They're set up to operate as more as a business. And in the operating funds here, you'll see I put the primary, there we go, where's this mouse? Oh, I put the primary revenue source for each fund. So in the general fund, that's going to be property tax, community development and building inspection, those are going to be the permit fees, transit is the payroll tax, and so forth and so forth. So those are the main operating funds in their revenue sources. The city also has 7 SDC type funds listed out there. And the new fund this year is that bottom one, which is the Frog Pond West Fund, and that's a infrastructure supplemental. It's an SDC-like fund. It's really separate in addition to the system development charges for that area to pay for the development of the Frog Pond area. Finally, we have 6 CIP funds. These are the construction type projects are outlined in these CIP funds. So additionally, on this slide, it's kind of a great way to understand kind of the flow of money within these funds, particularly the interfund transfers. These capital project funds are basically shell funds, zero balance. They rely on funding from the operating funds or the SDC funds. And each one of those movement of funds from either the operations or the SDC funds requires an interfund transfer. On the top of that, you'll see the general fund and the community development fund has a chance to recoup some of those because capital projects or CIP projects here don't exist in a vacuum. They rely on the work of the engineering staff here as well as legal counsel and typical kind of general fund operations. So those funds will flow back into the general fund and the community development fund through what we call project management fees. And the engineering staff and the planning staff track their time and they bill back the projects to those, and we recoup some of that back into the community development and general fund. So it's a little bit how everything works and really how the interfund transfer number here gets elevated pretty high because there's a lot of movement. The Oregon budget law, anytime you move money, you got to budget for it, appropriate it. There's a couple of different ways to look at the budget, and our budget in the aggregate is $212 million. This is an insightful pie chart way to look at it. It's based by fund level, and another way on the next slide we'll look at it is by category or expense type. They both total the same, $212 million. The pie chart broken out by funds and includes all the resources of those funds as well as the reserves, the contingencies, and interfund transfers. Again, this is about accountability. We have to budget for everything. A few interesting points on this pie chart is just looking at the size and the proportionality of the CIP SDC budgets. We're at $75.1 million of the overall budget. And of course, the business type funds, which are the utility funds, the water treatment plant, the wastewater treatment, all the utilities in the city, the stormwater pipes and stuff. That's the second largest by fund type of budget that we have here, and that's at $57.4 million. Finally, the general fund is our third, and the general fund is where it's the single largest fund. It's the main operating fund. This is where you're going to find law enforcement, parks and recreation, library, those type of activities. And then these are their other funds, basically. And you see transit actually sticks out. It's getting larger. So this is another way of displaying the budget. Again, it's $212 million, the same thing. Maybe a little more insightful depending on how you're looking at it. The operating budget for the city is $46.4 million. That's the cost, really the cost to run the city, to pay the salaries, the materials and services, the capital outlay, which is a little bit different than CIP. CIP is construction-related projects. When we speak of capital outlay, that typically is the one-time, could be vehicles, buses, stuff that doesn't really involve engineering or anything. That's capital, that's CIP related. So, and there's the CIP budget right there, 35.8 million. However, when Zach comes up with Kathy and discusses the CIP budget, you'll see it as a little bit larger. They're going to speak in terms of it being 48 million because they are including the urban renewal parts of the CIP as well as they gross it up in terms of those project management costs, because again, the CIP doesn't exist in a vacuum. It involves engineering costs, so that's how you get to that 48 million on a few more slides. Debt is a small portion of our overall budget. We only have two outstanding debts. One is the remaining, well, one is I think we have about $28 million left on the sewer treatment, no, is that the sewer treatment plant? And then a small amount of debt, maybe 3 million left on the original water treatment plant debt, and that actually will be fully defeased in at least 2 years from now. So very little debt and no general fund debt. You see that interfund transfer number, $52 million. That's a large part of the money moving back to fund those CIPs and back and forth. It's recognized, it nets out because it's an expense, it's an interfund expense in one, and it's an interfund revenue in another. So it's a wash. Contingencies are, what we have left. So if you have any questions too, I'm kind of like breezing through this. I apologize if anybody, if I shocked anybody, or if you have anything, just let me know.
Mr. Amidon.
So Keith, can you go back to that prior slide real quick? So the debt says 5.5 million. But you
That's the debt payment, sorry. That's what
Oh,
would
that's
be
the debt
appropriated for the
payment.
debt payment.
Ah.
The outstanding on the
Yeah,
balance
I got
sheet
you,
is
okay.
about 30 million, well, 28 plus the remaining water treatment plant.
So this is this is the annual operating.
The expenditures, yeah, the appropriations.
Thank you.
Mayor Knapp.
Thank you. So people ask in conversation, so how much are we really spending every year? So that's kind of hard to get people to think about, but this pie chart may kind of help because we're not spending the unappropriated every year, right? And the contingency, we expect to not spend most of it, though we might have to dip in for a little bit. I'm not sure I can really understand how to explain the interfund transfer piece of that. I mean, so on the right, yes, we're spending the operating, yes, we're spending the CIP, yes, we're spending the debt payments. So is that, in some sense, the answer to how much we're really spending?
What I say, I say it's the operating cost, because you're going to have the engineers, you're going to have, that's the cost to run the city, in my mind, plus the CIP. If we didn't do any construction projects, shut everything down, we could operate the city at $46.4 million. Those are the
Debt,
expenses.
plus debt.
Plus the debt payments, yeah.
Of course, we're still building projects, so that's where the additional 35.8, and then it's a unique feature of budget law here in Oregon, interfund transfers, they don't exist, it doesn't exist in financial reporting when we convert this to generally accounting financial reporting, which we will do June 30th, but for budgetary, anytime you move money, it's interfund transfer.
So if the engineering department is doing some work to prepare to do a capital project, we're paying their salaries, we're absorbing part of their cost.
Yeah.
So in some sense, we are expending those portions of interfund transfers in the course of a year's business.
Correct. Whenever an engineer or anyone in the community development department works on a capital project, there's a 4-digit code, and that's what they code it to on their timekeeping system. And then every month, at the end of the month, we have a fully weighted rate for each individual employee, and we calculate out how much they need to be reimbursed from the capital projects, and that entry is entered every month.
So in answer to that question that I say I hear from citizens sometimes, what should we be telling them?
You should tell them, what are you asking? You know what you should do? You should point them to YouTube, and we'll put a link up and point this. I think what you should say is that our operating budget is X. Because the CIPs and all the interfund transfers, I think people's eyes would just glaze
Right.
over.
Government accounting is a little bit different. You know, it's based on accountability, so you have to account for everything. It's all about accountability.
Right.
Private accounting, is based on profitability. It's a little bit, it's just a different paradigm, I guess, of looking at the financials. It's accountability.
But part of the message I want to tell people is, no, we're not spending $212 million this year.
You can tell them that.
I mean,
Right.
that doesn't portray an accurate picture of what's
We
happening.
just have to account for it.
That's our all funds budget, but it's not our operating budget.
When I'm asked that question, I like to turn to the budget matrix. And at the bottom, it has our operating budget, and then it'll have our working budget, which includes the capital improvements, the debt service, and our contingencies. Then it has our appropriational budget, which includes all of the interfund transfers. So I always have to turn to this page because I'm wanting to understand what the question is.
Right.
And then this kind of helps me to figure out how to answer it.
All right, well, thank you for
I think what
talking
you could
about
say
that
is
in kind of a layman's term.
You could just say that it costs $46.4 million to operate the city.
And then whatever we decide to build.
Correct.
And then we have a capital program that's, this year, it fluctuates every year, but this year is 35.8. We don't always hit the mark on our budgeted CIPs, but we're getting better.
And then another 5 if we're going to pay the debt.
And then another 5, there you go.
I mean,
We just got the answer.
I like what Kathy said, the operating budget's 46,000.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it costs to turn on the lights, 46 million, sorry. Couple of
Well, I want your bill. We could build a lot of things if we.
Mr. Bunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I thought I had, because I went to page 27, that's when Mayor Knapp asked about what's it cost to run the city? And then, Finance Manager, Ms. Roddocker, said, and that's where she went, so I thought, well, I felt pretty good about that. And then I thought I understood everything, and then we started talking about the fact that the operating budget is 46.4 million. But then on page 27, it says the city's working budget is basically 52.7 million. So now, now I am confused.
That's interfund. That's the.
No, that
interfund.
says the working budget. The working budget is 152,717,167.
I think,
What's the,
But that includes operating CIP, debt, contingency, and
Yeah,
unappropriated.
I think it's better explained on page 29. 'cause
29
The line items
under
are
operating.
delineated there.
Yeah.
where on 29?
Page 29, on
The
the far,
first bullet.
Oh, all the way, all the,
First hold.
the far right column, if you go down,
total?
46,
Yeah.
395, 605.
says the operating number. Then then you add in 106 to get to the working number.
Right.
So kind of it's pretty well
The debt
delineated
service
there.
and the contingencies.
I would probably answer it, the 46.4 plus the 5.5, because
Yeah.
we already owe we have to pay the debt. We can't
Yeah, operating
skip that.
in debt.
Operating in debt.
That's basically
52 million is
what it costs to run the city. And then you have a capital program that's separate.
Where's the 46.4 on 28 or
46,
29?
395, 605.
It's
About
the
halfway
operating
down,
line
page
item.
29.
Far right.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's the first.
yeah, I
bold
got
number.
it, I got it. Okay. So what is your definition? Let me ask another question then. What is your definition of what a working budget mean? What does that mean?
it just includes, the notion of an operating budget is more familiar to people, I think, in day-to-day
Okay.
world.
Okay.
The working, what we've called here the working budget, does include the capital improvements, it includes the debt, and it includes the contingencies, the fund balance, basically, that,
Whatever's not appropriated to a specific thing, right?
right.
Which
Yeah.
that's confusing to the layperson. The contingency part of this budget
Right.
doesn't make sense. It's like a savings account.
No, it makes sense to me.
Well, yeah, but
I mean.
when you're
a lot of
explaining it
stuff-
to a layperson,
Well, I am a layperson.
It's,
Careful.
yeah.
No, but seriously, I mean, you know, part of the challenge I have every time I read this, you know, each year I do this, you know, I go through the whole budget thing, I get my budget, I read it, and by the end of the third day, or the third night, or the second meeting, whatever it is, I go, yeah, I kind of got an understanding.
Yeah.
And then I'll look at it again for another year.
Yeah.
And I have to, it's like going, you know, coming back after summer school, you have to almost start like learning it again.
Yeah, it's the
But
uniqueness.
the thing is, and I know budgets, I work budgets, you know, but not like this. I mean, the kind of budgets I need to deal with are, you know, we just don't have to go to this level of detail. We have a level of detail, not like this. And so, you know, and if it's a challenge for me, and I'm not saying I'm the smartest, you know, the sharpest tool in the shed here, not by any means, I'm not an accountant or anything like that. But if it's difficult for me to really understand what's going on here, I think the challenge for the city, I think, is to, you know, never stop trying, and I'm not saying you are, or you're anything like that, but I think we can never stop challenging ourselves to really try to make this so it makes sense. So you know, the city manager's budget message, which is probably written by you and Kathy, I would assume, I don't know. But that's.
You assumed correctly, mostly, but it was actually Keith Katko.
But so
Life
that-
begins at 50 would not come from me. I'm 55. That'd make me 5 years old, and I wouldn't be sitting here right now.
I'm not even going to go there. But seriously, I mean, that's very good. That's like the Cliff Notes. But, you know, I sent a lengthy email to Kathy because I had a lot of questions. It just wasn't lining up. So again, am I as sophisticated as, you know, as the accountant's going to be? No, I'm not. But, you know, if you use me as the lowest common denominator, I think you're going to go a long way. That most citizens, if they pick this stuff up, they're not going to go through all this, but they should be able to read. My point being is the budget message in the beginning from the city manager should be enough that people walk away from it and say, I get it. So like Mayor Knapp's question, like, if I would recommend for the future is, he gets asked that question, he obviously gets asked a lot because he asked about it. What does it cost to operate the city? Just come right out and say that and say what it is and what's included with that. The other thing I would suggest is for us in the budget committee, I would like to get an electronic copy of this.
Okay.
Because it would make it a lot easier for me to kind of flip through and sort and kind of focus on things that I want to look for. Because I'm like, okay, where did I see that? I'm like this, I got, you know, all sorts of tabs and stuff like that. So that's the other thing I'd recommend, but anyway.
The proposed budget goes up on the website about 3 or 4 days after we provide you with the information. You guys get it first, and then we give you a couple days to start looking at it before we, so it is on the website, but it wouldn't have been the first night.
But it's there as a, all right, so I could search on it, it's a PDF obviously, because you have to have it lock it down, but,
Yeah.
so I could do search and stuff like that. Okay, I
Can
wasn't
we put
aware
it
of
on a
that.
thumb drive?
Sure.
No, I mean, if somebody wanted it electronically,
Yeah,
we
I
could
would-
certainly put it on a thumb drive.
Yeah, I would like that, because then I can, you know, as I'm riding on the train or something, I can stick it in my laptop and, you know, take a look at it. That would help me a lot.
Sure, we can do that.
But anyway, all right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions?
So we're going to talk a little bit about the resources side of the budget here. And again, as you'll see, trying to get my mouse going here. Well, at the bottom, you see that $212 million number again. What I did, these are all the revenues and the resources for the city. I just ordered them from largest to smallest. Our number one revenue source here at the city is charges for services. And what I did is did a little breakout here, kind of try to explain what's new on, so there'll be a sidebar. 26.3 million, that's all the water, sewer, storm, road maintenance, stormwater charges on your utility bills. There's 6,000 customers here at the city. All those payments come flowing into the city, processed diligently by our finance department. And so in that 26 million, incidentally, is $1.5 million of water sales to Sherwood, which that in itself is up $500,000. So yeah, I mentioned that at the bottom here. The Delta 6% increase There is a stormwater rate increase in January. That's not really moving the needle. Moving the needle is really that water sale to Sherwood, as well as just growth, population growth of everything. Other government revenue is $10.7 million, and I'll try not to go through all these. I'm flowing around in my numbers, but that includes all the intergovernmental revenue flowing into the general fund, the road operating fund, transit, and CIPs. And what's moving that needle, you see it's 37% increase, is the new STIF funding. It's a $1.8 million that's flowing into the transit fund, and that is the new, sometimes referred to as House Bill 2017, sometimes referred to as the Keep Oregon Moving Initiative. But what it really means, bottom line, is $1.8 million flowing into the transit fund, at least for the next year. And we'll talk with Dwight later this evening about that, the spending plans for that. SDC, the System Development Charges. What's new, that $900,000 differential is the Frog Pond supplemental fee that went in. Next year, anticipating about 50 houses, the supplemental fee is about $18,000, so looking about an increase of $900,000. And that will be spent, of course, on the developments needed for that area. Property tax is our fourth largest revenue here at the city, and that grows, of course. It's capped at 3% assessed value increases, measure 50. Our permanent tax rate is 2.5206 per 1,000. That's growing a little bit more than 3%, basically. Development growth, residential and commercial. New property comes on, the assessment rolls at a ratio of about, we get taxed, of course, not on market value, but on assessed value. So the new homes, new residential typically come on at a ratio of a 0.667, I think is the average. What they refer to as some kind of ratio the assessor uses, so as new property comes online. Other taxes in that $5 million numbers, that's our hotel motel tax here at the city. It's up slightly, as well as transit tax, $5.2 million in the transit fund. That is at a rate of 0.5%, and that is just increasing. License permits and fees. There is a $300,000 retraction in building permits fees. The building permit, that is the building inspection fund. The fund has a healthy reserve year over year, and that's permit revenue. That decline, revenue timing of permits being pulled is kind of variable year to year, and the projection, we're projecting a $300,000 decline. It's a little bit of an art when these permits are going to come in, but so anyway, we're predicting that to come in slightly less. Interest, of course, big year, 73% increase. The city follows the ORS regulations on our investment guidelines. We invest in local government investment pool, where we're getting about a 2.75% interest rate. About a third of our investments in there. We also invest in corporate notes and AAA government-sponsored securities, which are like the Fannie Mae backed securities. And then what's new is, I apologize, I said I wasn't going to read that all, but what's new is the raising interest rates year over year. And so that is how we get to that $212 million in resources. Again, this is all about accountability. So on these next few slides, we're going to talk about where the money goes.
Mr. Bunn?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you go back?
Sure.
So this is great. I like this a lot. And I know you said, well, I don't want to go through all of this, but I appreciate you doing that.
Okay.
I guess my rule of thumb would be, anything that's over, anything that shows over maybe a, I don't know, 10 or 20% difference, but it's over, say, 2 mil or something like that. That's what I like to see, something like that.
Okay.
Because that's what I look at. I look for, because again, I'm not in here with a calculator. If you guys can't do the numbers, then we're in deep trouble. I don't even look at that stuff. What I look for are trends.
Okay.
And I only have so much time to devote to this.
Right.
But this is great. I like this a lot. So I very much appreciate that. I want to issue that. I have a question though. When you say corporate notes, what are corporate notes? Just so I understand what that is.
It's not stock, but it's like corporate bonds. So we can purchase, like an Apple will have a bond sale. We can
Oh, really?
purchase a portion, yes.
Okay.
A lot of financing, a lot of banks.
Oh,
have
really?
Corporate paper, yeah.
Okay. So no stock market stuff,
No.
really? This is all
No
bonds?
derivatives,
This
no
is a-
no Orange County stuff.
No, this is we can only go out to 18 months, and it's a fixed interest rate. We know what we'll be receiving throughout the life of the investment from day one.
Do you have a limit to the amount, to the percentage of investment in corporate notes?
Yes, we can only have 30% of the overall investment portfolio, which right now is about 146 million. And we can't go more than 5% in one particular name. So I can't buy all Bank of America. I have to spread it all out through different various names.
And does the state have that same restriction?
The state is different for their own. The city investment policy is that we follow the state ORS 294, and they are very restrictive. These are all of their things, but they have their own. You can have your own investment policy and have different limits, which the state does, and most cities do. But we've always gone with the state. It's a little bit more restrictive, short time frames, but so, when things are going up, we're a little bit behind, but when they're going down, it's a little bit better because we're turning stuff around faster. So it's worked well for the city. So we've not tried to create our own investment policy.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Councilor Stevens?
Yes, thank you. So in that vein, I think this pertains on page 23 on the line of interest earnings. It's about a little more than a third of the way down. It says there's a 73% increase or increase in that. So is that pertaining to this raising interest rates? What's new here? You expect that kind of difference in?
Well, actually, as it's turning out, we budgeted, it's a 73% increase from last year's budget. But what we're actually seeing in revenues this year is about the same.
Okay.
The actuals for this year, we're anticipating about 1.8. So we did a slight increase, not really thinking that this upward trend will continue for another year at that pace.
Okay.
So when you compare this year's budget to what we're actually going to receive this year, they're very similar.
They're going to be you're going to be spot on this year, and then you expect a significant increase for this
Just
upcoming
when
fiscal
you're
year.
comparing the budget. We thought we were going to get $1.1 million last year when we were doing this for this current fiscal year. We're actually going to receive about 1.8 million.
Okay,
And so we just cautiously went up a little bit.
all right, okay. So, and staying on that same page, just quickly explain what's in the miscellaneous, the next line down. I know it's a small number, but the increases, off the top of your head, do you know? I know, those are sort of the catch-all little things.
Yeah.
I'll be able to tell you by the end of the night.
Okay,
I've got all the
okay,
detail
that'd
over
be
there.
just helpful, just highlights.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Probably one or two things in.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions on where it comes from? Okay,
Can I ask one other question?
sure.
So if we're earning more interest income from our investments than we expected, can we prepay on some of the debt that we're sitting on, or is there any prepayment penalties on that, and what's the differential spread?
I know that on our urban renewal debt, they all have a prepayment penalty, and I was pretty surprised. We were looking at paying off one this year, and it was like $110,000
penalty?
prepayment penalty. I'm not sure on, most of these bonds are backed by the full faith and credit of the city, so they may not have, they probably most likely would not have. But there again, the debt is either for our water or for our sewer. So this is overall city earnings. So this could be for the general fund and for community development and building. And without accountability, you don't, not that you couldn't, but typically when you earn that revenue, you could certainly put it towards that. Now, water and sewer does have a higher portion of the investment interest because they have larger fund balances. So they have $10, $11 million fund balance, so I'm able to invest that in 18-month products. Where, with our building fund that has, maybe $800,000, I usually keep that kind of money in the local government pool because I don't want to tie it up. So it's kind of an interesting policy. Something I really enjoy, spend a lot of time looking at and figuring it all out. But that could be something that, you'd look at. The water, like we said, will be paid off in 2 years to begin with.
We generally look at our debt and see if we can refinance, if that's something that is
Yeah,
available.
if it looks like.
And we do look at paying off things early where we can.
Right.
So it is kind of a policy of the city to do that.
Yes, we are doing it.
We monitor all of our debt, yes.
Other questions? Okay.
So then this is the expenditure side. Again, this will also, in the end, balance to $212 million. Where the money goes, there's a lot less categories. The first section is personnel services, which is the labor of the city. What's new? There is some increasing service levels, particularly in transit, and we'll go over those when we get to the program expenditure section of the budget, and we'll have transit come up too and talk about that. A lot of that is related to the STIF funding. They're hiring 4 new drivers plus a supervisor, or requesting to anyway. Parks maintenance includes 2 additional FTEs as we've grown parkland in the city, and the admin department has a .50 2-year temporary position to do some
Records.
records retention type work. We can get into that too when we go into the program expenditures. Additionally, what's new, what's that delta on the 20 versus the 18? There's COLA increase going into effect on July 1st. Health insurance premiums, we've budgeted at 10%. PERS rate increase of 4%. That budget of 20 million is about 62% wages, 38% benefits. The next line is materials and services. Kind of interesting for the city of Wilsonville, 50% of our materials and services are for the big 3 contracted out services. We contract out water treatment plant, we contract out wastewater treatment, and we contract out law enforcement. Another thing moving the needle on the materials and services, again, the transit department. With all that STIF funding, they're expected to increase service levels, and that will be reflected in that. Capital outlay, these are those one-time charges, not construction related. 3.5 million, I should apologize, these are all in $1 million too. So that's 3.5 million. 2.5 million is related to transit buses, vans, a trolley, and some CNG compressors. Put the page numbers in there too of your budget book for additional reference. And then there's some water treatment plant type equipment that brings that up to 3.5 million. And again, that's how we get to that total operating budget then of 46.4 million. And then we come into that capital improvement section, and this is what Kathy and Zach will talk about. We have that debt, which we kind of just briefly touched on. It's 28 million for the sewer treatment plant and about 2.9 million left in the water treatment plant upgrade. Interfund ties out to the interfund revenues. And then the contingency, this is really our ending fund balance. And so on the next slide, we'll go see where each fund, it's one slide, so where each fund ends up to get to that 72 million.
Okay, Mayor Knapp?
Thank you. Where does our future PERS obligation show up?
Shows up in all the operating budgets. So you're talking about the increase?
Yeah, and thinking about the governor's program, as I understand it, to enable municipalities to prepay some of that.
Yeah, Kathy and I
which is-
have talked about that if you want.
When we get there, maybe I don't want to jump the gun, but I was just looking about where the money goes here. Where would that be identified?
Well, wherever we have personnel, whatever the increases are, would be spread across those operating budgets. So that handles the increase, but in terms of the governor's
The last
proposal.
I heard is that they had taken that one off the table for the cities, and that they
Oh,
were
really?
just going to focus on the school districts. So we were originally going to, the way it was that in fall of this year, you would put in an application to see if you could put in $1 million. So we would not have included it until our next budget. And then they were going to match it with 25%. So that was going to be a really great return on that particular investment. But unfortunately, the last I heard is that had been changed, and the focus now is on the school districts.
Well, a lot of things are still changing with the legislature still in session, so I guess we should wait and see how it comes out before we.
But
make
if
any
we had an
decisions.
opportunity to do something like that, we have the resources to do it. Not all cities do. We
Right,
would
right.
jump on a 25% return.
Yeah, so that kind of return with the opportunity would be much greater than prepaying, straight debt,
Yeah.
3%.
Correct.
Any other questions? Okay.
So that contingency line item is the reserve, the 20% reserve against operating costs?
No, in this one, this is the ending fund balances in the aggregate, $72.5 million. And the next slide will break it out by fund. To get to that $212 million, though, it's included in this display, just because we have to account for the 212. It's a requirement, or in terms of the Oregon budget law, vernacular wording of it. So that $72.5 million, again, right there, at the balance. So this is the fund balances of every single fund. This was the fund balance in fiscal year 19, and then this is what we're projecting it to be, the ending fund balance in fiscal year 20, fiscal year end 20. 13 million, that's basically on track for what we anticipate in conjunction with our 5-year forecast that we also do in conjunction with this. And I believe that document was given tonight. So these kind of line up with our 5-year projections. So going down to the building inspection, typically, we have funds that we keep a closer eye on. Building inspection is going to be a fund we keep our eye on, just because it's slightly dipping. That's still a healthy reserve, but it's something we need to keep an eye on. CD is kind of one of those. That's Community Development Fund. That's the engineering planning group of the city. Typically is always on the list as well. Again, that's a pretty healthy fund balance for now. It's just we're keeping an eye on it. Road operations on track. Road maintenance, transit, of course, is doing really well. Fleet is an internal service fund. And here's our utility accounts. Stormwater, also, you see that big dip down there, but that is primarily being used to fund capital stormwater projects. And of course, we have a big capital project demands for our stormwater, so the funding of that is going to be closely watched. Street lighting fund, doing fine, and then pretty much everything else to get to that contingency number that you saw on the previous slide of $72.5 million, which is a part of the overall budget of the $212.6 million.
But these are the ending fund balances for 2020.
Yeah, as budgeted.
So help me reconcile the ending fund balance to the 146 million we got invested cash.
Well, right, some of that, you're getting into some balance sheet theory.
I'll look to Paul.
That's a question I will get back to you on.
That's fine.
I think. Give me a little time to think about it. We could throw a pretty good slide on our.
I think that's kind
our
of
next budget presentation in 2 weeks.
and that's fine, but I do think that's an important issue
Yeah.
for the public
Mhm.
to be able to reconcile that number and this number.
Yeah.
So, okay, fine, thanks.
Yeah, the balance sheet is something that, this is a financial plan for next year.
Appreciate it.
We don't go into the balance sheet all that much, and I give a special plug, a shout out to our consolidated annual financial report, which the financial year end is June 30th. So, after we get done with the budget, we go straight into working on the financial reporting, which we do all summer, and then that gets audited by independent audit firm in September or October, and those numbers, that's our financial position for the city. This is our financial plan for the next year ahead. Kind of a little bit different theory.
One thing I'd like to note on the fleet fund with the $1 million ending balance, that includes the replacement fund that we have for all of the vehicles and a lot of our large equipment. As soon as we purchase a new vehicle, we immediately start setting money aside so that when it's ready to be traded in or sold off, we have the cash available to pay for the next piece of equipment.
Counselor Stevens.
By 6.
So I remember budget conversations and then also council conversations about the community development fund, about, it's always, for several years in the past, it's been one of those on the watch list kind of thing. And it's looking better now. Is it better now than it was, say, 2 years ago? Or is it staying
It
steady?
still has a variation, and at our next meeting, Dan in building, which is obviously a different fund, but
Right.
he has a great graph that will show you, that shows a volatility of the actual permits. It's really pretty amazing over a 10-year span. And, that kind of reflects the same in CD fund.
And CD.
So-
And it's so many different departments with engineering, planning.
Yeah.
Although
So,
natural resources
and that's why
now.
we kind of keep an eye on it.
Right.
The fund began with a $2 million investment from the general fund many years ago. So when I look at this, and I see it still over $2 million, over the long haul, it's on track. It's just, individual years, we get a little off track, and then we'll have a really good year, and, then it kind of works down, and then you'll have another good one. So I always try to look at it in that long term. It still has the original investment that was, provided to get it going.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of those more difficult ones because some of that money is services, services provided to the community. That's what we're here for. And then some of it is recouped in different ways.
Right.
So, but not 100%. So it's never, yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, but that's good that 10 years ago, it's right where we are right today. So it's not.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Katko, can you go back a slide, please? So contingency, so as of June 30th, you're projecting we have 73 million unspent funds, or whatever you want to call it. I hesitate to, I want to choose my words carefully here. And the requirement is that goes back in the general fund.
Well, that 72 million is broken out amongst the funds. So there's 13 million in the general fund.
But I thought, again, I'm showing my ignorance on this stuff. I thought at the end, when it isn't spent, it's required to go back into the general fund. It's not. It can stay in.
Right.
It stays in the fund. It's
It's
just,
the revenue specifics.
It wouldn't be appropriate because there's water funds.
Right.
Stay in the water fund, and that kind of stuff.
So it goes back to this fund. But
it never leaves that fund.
It never leaves
This
that
is just a
fund.
roll-up number of all of our contingencies for every budget.
Right.
So basically, a contingency is just, if it's not spoken for a specific purpose, it just sits in the contingency, right?
Right.
Right. So I guess what I'm reacting to is, Kathy, this is one of the things you said to me in the email. You said, in cost referencing the amounts from the budget message to these fund summaries, you also need to exclude the ending fund balance amounts as listed in each fund, as those remaining balances are not being used to fund the appropriate CIPS. So I guess that's what my confusion is. It stays in the fund. What do you use it for? You can't allocate it to capital.
It's
Capital.
there, like, so if we had let's say we had a earthquake, and we needed to access money, we could pull it from contingency without too much trouble, right?
So once it's in contingency, it has to stay in contingency. You can't turn around and say, well, we want to use,
We could come to council and ask for supplemental budget, and we would pull from contingency.
but would it have to be, so for, if you ended up with a contingency of 12 million in water, so you'd have to come back to council and say, by the way, we have this sitting in contingency, there's and X amount, we'd want to use this for a capital, water-related capital project. That's
Yes.
easy to do.
Yeah, we do 4 a year, right? We do, well,
We do several years.
we do a lot. Well, not a lot. We do 4. We do 4 supplemental budgets every year. That's our goal.
Right.
4 to 5.
Okay.
Because there are things that you can't plan for or anticipate. There are things, pumps go out, or, it could be anything. Or maybe you have a capital project that you thought was going to be X, and then this economy we're living in, where we have tariffs and everything else, everything's going through the roofs.
Right.
We don't know what we don't know. We tried to do the best we can, but we don't always get it right.
So like, again, this goes along what I was saying earlier, was I think I understand this stuff, then I read something, somebody throws me a curve, like, oh, I guess I don't understand. So no offense, Kathy, but that's, when I saw this here, and then we start talking about this, is, okay, what can we use this for? So,
I know it is confusing. We also talked with Bill earlier today, and just to put a different layer of complexity is that we actually have 5 types of ending fund balance. That is something that we have to record for our CAFR, and it's easier for us to include it into the budget. So we kind of, for us, it's easier, but what we're learning is that it does make it complicated for other people. But we have non-spendable, which it has its own category. We have restricted, we have committed, we have assigned, we have unassigned. Unassigned are the 20% budget, the operating financial policies. So they're all different levels. We do in the back as a glossary that kind of explains what we're capturing for. And that is because it's a GAAP accounting requirement. So,
all right, very good.
so that's what, it makes it even more complicated, which is already complicated.
I do like this graph or this chart. What would add to it to make it a little more comprehensive in my mind is if you had the reserve dollar for each of these funds. So that way you can kind of see how much is already spoken for. So, or,
Right.
yeah, what's protected, so to speak.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Anyone else? Okay.
So I think we now will go in and talk a little bit about the capital improvement part of the budget.
Hello, musical chairs here. Never know where you're going to end up at. So this evening, I have Zach Weigel with us, our capital project manager. We also have Patty Nelson, our city engineer. So any questions that you have, I've brought my big guns out, so they can take care of it for you. I can talk numbers, but they talk the building part. As alluded to by Keith, my CIP number is a little bit different and includes the interfund transfers for the project management fees, and it also includes the urban renewal budgets, project budgets. And when we're looking tonight, we're looking at just the city side, so that's why this is a little bit different. As typical in our budget document, the section begins on page 169. We break down our CIP projects by type. And as you can see from this particular graph, 78% of our CIPs are related to construction projects. So we will spend the most of the time this evening talking about our construction projects as they have the biggest portion of the particular. Are we getting a score in or something?
Portland's up by 13. Portland's up by 13.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you for the update. I could tell from everybody, nobody's watching or listening.
I got my score watcher back there.
Anymore.
Oh, he's got it over there too.
Second quarter, 3 minutes,
Second quarter?
3 minutes, 3:09 left in the second.
Okay, well, thank you for the update. Additional categories include our master plans and studies, system development reimbursement credits, livability improvements, our annual maintenance projects, and miscellaneous projects. And when we look at it by funding source, we can see that the primary funding source for this fiscal year will be our SDCs. It's about 39% of the overall budget at $18.9 million. Our operating funds, which include water, sewer, and stormwater, is about 23% or $11.1 million. Our urban renewal, $9.4 million. We have a couple of projects in our year 2000 plan, and we have our first project going on in the new Coffee Creek area. And the remaining, all other, is 18% at $8.7 million, and the largest portion of that is general fund at 3.7. So this year we have 124 projects. This is actually 9 less than last year. So we're pretty consistent with the number of projects that we have. And one of the questions that we're always asked is, how does a project get onto the CIP list? And as Keith referred to, number one is the health, safety, and welfare, not only for the citizenry, but of course for maintaining our fixed assets that we're responsible for. Master plans and different kinds of studies are a big driver of our CIPs. They typically give us at least a 20-year budget, a schedule of all the major CIPs. They'll tell us what kind of funding sources can be used to construct a project. And of course, council goals and initiatives help us to prioritize the projects, because obviously we have lots of them. So as we have done in the past, we kind of arbitrary.
One question,
What?
Mr. Amidon?
When the capital projects are prioritized, if you go through the book, all I see are high and medium. So my question in terms of priority is, why do we say high or medium if that's all we've got? Do we have extremely important or low priority? Well, I mean, who puts the grade on it?
We could break it down a little bit further.
Sure, there's a lot of when is it needed. So like with a water system, there's projects to add, expand the treatment plant. There's projects to add storage. So those projects are implemented when those facilities are needed. So there's a lot of look at when did those projects actually need to be implemented, and that helps determine the priority as well.
So it's on the list, it's one of the 124 projects that's on the list, even though we may not need it for 5 years?
Right. And sometimes you'll see in the master plans, like the projects will be broken down for like within the next 5 years,
Yeah.
within 5 to 10 years. And
I think, I understand that, and so instead of high or medium, would it make sense to say next 5 years or something like that to alleviate the immediacy? When I'm looking at it, it's like, oh my gosh, we're kind of chewing off a lot here.
24 projects.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Well, the projects that are detailed in the book are slated for this fiscal year. Now, whether or not we get to them all is a different scenario, and we'll hear about that at our mid-year review next March. But yeah, every one of these that are included in the detail of the budget, we are requesting for budget authority to move forward with those projects,
right.
if everything, works out well.
So the ones we just referred to that we may need in the next 1 to 5 years?
I apologize, I misunderstood.
Okay.
I thought you were talking about the master plans and how they're prioritized from the master plan,
okay,
not
gotcha.
in the budget book. Sorry about that.
Counselor Stevens.
There is at least one low priority project in here, and I was unhappy to see it because it's one that I care a lot about. It's the French Prairie Bridge across the river. But I also realize that's a really big project, and we'll need additional funding for that from many different sources. So, but And of course, Zach is working on that task force right now. We're meeting in June to continue that project, but there's at least one low one, but it would be great. I know there are a lot of citizens who, when are you going to build that bridge? Tell me all the time. My kids will be long gone before that ever gets built. So, but it's low here, so I just want to make that point that there is one.
So as we've done in the past, we've kind of arbitrarily divided the city into 4 quadrants so that we can kind of focus on particular areas and the projects that are going on in this particular case, the northwest quadrant. So we'll start down here at the bottom. You'll see that we have, we have several little houses here. These are our facility projects. We have 3 scheduled for the transit facility, and it includes a CNG fueling station, the transit district office remodel, the smart parking lot improvement, and of course, citywide, we continue to have our ADA and transit shelter ongoing project. In total, transit projects are about $352,000, of which $282,000 will be funded by grant, so the majority. We also have next door to the transit center, we have purchased the property that will be the future site of the Public Works facility. We have $1.5 million budgeted for this fiscal year, which will be used to do the preliminary design so that we get an idea of what the actual cost of the facility will be. And it will also include a financing plan so that we can figure out who's going to be responsible for paying for what. We have 2 projects here, the Coffee Creek Interceptor and the Kinsman Road. Both of these projects are already completed. They're just small carryover budgets because there always seems to be at least one invoice that comes in 3 or 4 months later. We have a very large Park SDC reimbursement it's a total of $2.3 million. This is for the Villebois Southeast, which includes Regional Parks 7 and 8 and Neighborhood Park 6. When it's an SDC reimbursement, that means the developer is actually doing the construction and that we will use SDC funds to reimburse the cost for the capacity improvements of the project. We also have a universal health. Every time we try to get this one off the list, somehow or another we hear that it's coming alive again. So we continue to budget that one. And that would be a facility that would be out in our Coffee Creek area off of Day Road, excuse me. And we have 2 small stormwater. We have a Coffee Creek Commerce Circle stormwater facility and a 95th Avenue storm repair. And then this morning, luckily, Zach volunteered to talk about the large project. So he'll take over on the Garden Acres Road.
Yeah, so you'll see in the that north area, the Garden Acres Road project, which includes extension of sewer, and stormwater services. And this is really the first project that's really implementing the Coffee Creek industrial area plan. And the first project that's really bringing those utilities up into the Basalt Creek and Coffee Creek areas to kick off development in there. So that project is slated to start construction here in the next couple months.
Great. In total, those projects are about $4.3 million. And one of the things that I think is neat about the project is as while we're doing the road, the Willamette water supply providers will be putting in the big pipe underneath. And they will actually be contributing $1.2 million for the cost of the road over that's over the pipe. So.
Mayor Knapp.
Thank you. I just wanted to speak to the committee as well as the public and talk about a couple of these projects. The Garden Acres Road project is a carefully considered move by the council to try to initiate infrastructure that will attract private sector development to that area. We put a question before the voters a couple years ago about creating an urban renewal district in order to help facilitate that, and the public supported us on that. I know that we have had, through our economic development people, several ongoing negotiations with private sector developers, and it's kind of been a chicken and egg deal. You know, they really were wanting to get moving, but without having the road there, they just couldn't quite commit. And we kept saying, well, if you just would commit, then we could build the road. But we've really had to try to move forward, and I'm optimistic that we will see notable interest by the private sector fairly short order as that project gets out of the box. So I think that council has coalesced around that being a pretty significant and important piece that we do that, urban renewal agency, I guess I should say. The Public Works facility down the south end is the other one. The council bought the ground for that facility adjacent to the transit facility several years ago now. I can't even say, 4 or 5 years ago maybe. And Public Works is scattered all over the city in different facilities, and it does not operate as efficiently as it could. By locating it centrally, kind of in the middle between the north and south ends of town, you know, which is one of the goals we've had, and bringing that together, especially adjacent to mechanic shops at the Transit and Fleet Center that does a lot of the maintenance work on our mechanical equipment, will make it much more efficient, I think, and being able to bring all of our public works into one building has been a strong goal. The other thing that goal involves is moving Public Works out of the building across the street here, where the police also occupy, and the police have been extremely constrained in what they can do in that building, sharing it with Public Works. So that is a strategic move that council has made over discussions over a few years, and in fact, council prioritized that as a formal goal at our recent goal-setting session, is to get that Public Works facility moving. So those are big moves that the council has been thinking about and strategizing on for several years, and I'm personally very glad to see them in this year's budget.
So when we look at the northeast quadrant, makes kind of sense that the main projects are all related to our Frog Pond area. We include a Frog Pond improvement for roads between Wilsonville Road and Advance Road. We have a sanitary improvement of about $142,000. The Canyon Creek Beckman Signal is also the project that will help improve the traffic flow out in that area. And the big project is the big Beckman Dip Bridge. Take it, Zach.
Yeah, so those projects are all starting design in this next fiscal year, and the Beckman Road improvement is one of and the Beckman Road sanitary project are both projects funded through the Frog Pond supplemental fee. So as that money starts coming in, that will pay for the construction of those two projects. And then the water system telemetry project is, that's the approximate location of the Gashel Shaft well, and starting to bring the telemetry systems up for that well with current technology.
Question.
Susie?
Thanks. So if I recall, I can't find the page, it looked like, I thought I noticed that the Beckman Bridge, the dip bridge was a medium priority, is that right? Or is it a high priority? I can't remember. But, I mean, I know it's an expensive bridge. I know it's really expensive, but it also is a safety,
Right.
huge
Well, it's also a high
concern.
priority, should be a high
High
priority.
priority.
It is a high
Just
priority?
because,
Okay, maybe I missed it.
closing- We're using the Urban Renewal Year 2000 funds, and we're anticipating closing down that district
Okay,
in a couple of years, so we need to get that
Built.
built.
so it is a high priority, okay.
Yeah, if it
okay.
isn't, we'll
Even if
make
it's
sure.
not listed as one, it's a high priority.
We can make that change.
Is that the last project in the,
Yes.
okay,
Okay,
in the
thank you, thank you.
urban renewal?
Definitely high priority for those of us who live in there.
Yeah, oh, yeah, over there, yeah, okay. Beckman Bridge. Yeah, it says, 4212 Beckman Dip Bridge. You found it. It's medium in here, right? Is it right there? It's listed as medium, but it's not.
We're changing it to super high.
We'll change it.
Super high. We're going another level, whole another level.
We just elevated it.
See, it's amazing. This is how it all works, right?
Okay, this is how it works, right?
I bet you won't see medium or high in next year's budget, but
We'll spend a lot more time on that
if
part.
it's in there, it's happening.
Okay, thank you.
And we also have some park SDC for the Beckman Trail and Trailhead, should that project move forward with the developers. Once again, we have a lot of activity in the southeast quadrant. We are continuing with our Charbonneau repair projects, storm, sewers, streets, and water, combined budget of about $3 million. Or we have our Memorial Park Master Plan implementation. It's about a $450,000 budget for this year, including the boat dock, the skate park, and the pump track designs. We had a recent a look at the Bouger Barn, and it was discovered that there were some deficiencies, and so we have about $50,000 to do a couple things to make it a bit safer. We do have several projects that look very familiar. They were on last year's budget. Unfortunately, when these came back from going out to bid, the prices had increased rather significantly, so we are rebudgeting them with the higher costs. Includes the Town Center Park stage cover, the building department area remodel, the front counter remodel, and the executive conference rooms. These are all projects that will be taking place here on the first floor of City Hall, and our Public Works building seismic upgrade project. And we'll let Zach talk about the Memorial Park pump station.
Susie's.
Oh, no.
Yeah,
I
you wanna wait?
want to hear about the
Okay.
pump station first. Is that what you're going to talk about?
Yeah, so the Memorial Park Pump Station is really a project to support development of the Frog Pond, even though it's quite a bit a ways from that development. It's kind of the first phase in 3 phases. It's currently under design and scheduled for construction next year. The following phases will be replacing or upsizing the interceptor that runs along Beckman Creek up to the Frog Pond development.
Counselor Steens.
So do we have a location for that pump station yet?
Yes, it's actually staked out there right now, if you
Staked
go
out
down
there?
there. Yeah,
And is it near the tennis courts, near the dog park?
it's actually next to
There's purpose to this.
It's kind of between the gravel parking lot for the dog park and between the park's maintenance barn.
Over there, okay. So I just want to make a suggestion. So it's in the park, and it's basically a brick rectangle building, or square building, right? Like all the other pump stations. So I'm just wondering if the Parks Department here, if we could utilize one side of that to actually be a recreational amenity for a wall ball or practicing tennis or something. You know, we talked about 3-4 years ago in a work session about putting this building in the park and where it was going to be located, and it had to be a certain place in order to make it function well because of elevations and things like that. I don't know.
Right.
I don't know if you were here. I know Nancy was here. And so I'm just wondering if we can, since we have to have a brick building anyways, can we use it also for a recreation? Just an idea to mull over.
Yeah.
In your committee meetings to make it also, you know, amenity. So it's not just something that sits there. So it's something the kids can use.
Yeah, it's definitely something we can take a look at. I'll pass that.
I mean, you don't want to damage the building or anything, but if it would be something that is multifunctional,
Right.
I guess, multi-purpose.
Yeah, I'll pass that along to the project
Okay.
manager and.
Perfect.
and something we'll take a
I'll
look at.
spend a lot more money, though.
Mayor Knapp.
Thank you. Couple things. Just would like to clarify for those that might be listening, as well as committee, the Charbonneau project. Can you kind of put that in context? That is a multi-year,
Right. that's-
long-term? I mean, can you kind of put this year's expenditures in the context with the whole project?
Sure, that's part of the Charbonneau Consolidated Improvement Plan that was passed by council about 4 or 5 years ago. Really a plan to improve all of the utilities and roads within the Charbonneau district, but plan together so that it limits the impact on the residents in Charbonneau. So this is actually the fourth phase of 25 phases over the next 30 years. So,
And those projects are broken down into priority.
right, yes, right. They are prioritized based on a condition assessment in the consolidated plan. So these are some of the highest priority projects that are needed in the Charbonneau area. So it includes water, sewer, storm, and roadway reconstruction along that section shown on there of French Prairie Drive and then a portion of Old Farm Road.
Thank you for that. The other thing I want to mention, I guess this is partly because I was at JPAC committee this morning at 7:30 or something downtown. The ODOT is undertaking what they're calling a rebalancing effort on all of our maintenance and improvement projects across the state, which comes out because it turns out that everything's costing more than it was projected to cost. And they're talking 30 to 50% deficiencies on some hundreds of projects potentially across the state, and trying to figure out what has to be prioritized, what has to be abandoned or pushed back into subsequent years in order to have funding to actually complete some of those higher priority projects that they're already working on. And the environment that we're in right now just seems like construction costs keep spiraling upward with no real pause in sight. And I'm just wondering, in that environment, clearly across the whole state, how are we managing that or planning to deal with that other than just plugging ahead with, whatever's next and seeing what it costs?
Well, I think it all starts when you're putting your master plans together to making sure that your cost estimates are as realistic as you can make them, given the environment that we're in. And then, so when we look at our master plans, they were developed at a point in time. So I would assume, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that when you look at those projects, you do cost updates.
We do,
and we go along.
And we also do it as part of the budget, we apply inflation factors to those based on the CPI.
In our 5-year forecast, there's a 3% inflation for
We did have, we had our public works seismic upgrade came in 100% over the engineer's cost estimate. So we had to give some money back to the state for some design that we did. We're going to go back and apply for another round of grants this year if they allocate any money to that program again.
So this seems to be an immediate reality and probably will be for the next few years. It's hard to see beyond that, but it makes it more challenging for us to try to complete all these projects that we think are important. And, I guess I'm asking us to recognize.
We do recognize it. The thing that complicates it, I think, this time around is that we've all been through boom and bust cycles in the economy, and when things are bad, people are hungry, you get more competitive bids. We're at full employment right now. Everybody's growing everywhere, pretty much. And then if you add the complicating factor of what's going on with the world economic situation, with these tariffs being slapped on, on every side of the aisle, that makes things more expensive. So steel packages are going to be a lot more than they used to be. So we can only control what we can control.
Right. But we just have
We're
to,
planning
we
for
have
it.
to live within those realities. I mean, that's,
Yeah, absolutely.
Mrs. LaGarza.
Yes, I just had a quick question while we're still in the southeast quadrant. On Memorial Park, the document we have refers to the master plan. And I was just, because I don't have access to, I'm not sure exactly what's in that. I don't know if you could summarize maybe what's in there or how that was developed. Was it, how those improvements were decided upon, because it looks like there's a pretty large number there, so I was kind of curious.
Yeah, so that has, each park has its own specific master plan, and I can't remember the exact date that we did Memorial Park. I think it was,
Last year, wasn't it?
no, Memorial Park Master Plan? Wasn't that when Stan Shearer was here? 2011, yeah. So that had its own list of projects and cost estimates and all that. So because parks are basically required general fund to do, we do as much as we can. There has been some talk, there was some talk at the goal setting session to maybe look at doing a bond to get some of these projects off the ground. I don't know that that became an actual goal, but maybe in the future it might be.
And I guess I'm kind of wondering what type of improvements are part of the master
Oh,
plan
okay.
that this will be funding?
Got
Only
it.
because I'm just a little curious, but I don't know if maybe it would behoove me to go look at the master plan.
We could provide you a copy,
Okay.
but it has everything from kayak area. We have sports fields that we have to put in down there. We've just completed a dog park and a parking lot. There's tennis courts, pickleball courts, so it's got every facility down there. I'm not sure if lighting is part of that master plan. I think it is. But I think when Mike comes up to do his budget in, is it 2 weeks? We can certainly highlight the Memorial Park stuff, and we can get you a copy of the plan as well.
Well, and actually, I don't think you need to now that you've said as much as you've said.
Okay.
The only reason I ask is because one day I was out there on the tennis courts early in the morning, and there were some pickleball folks, and they were actually setting up on the tennis court and on the basketball court, and it seems like this might have been a regular thing for them. So I was just wondering how, how these, and it sounds like pickleball is part of it, not that I'm a pickleball player, but I just experienced that, and I wondered if we'd went out to the public to ask them.
Yes.
What type of amenities they would be using at the park. and-
Absolutely,
okay.
yeah. All the amenities down there have gone through a massive public outreach process.
Great.
Mr. Bunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, I really like this approach of combining all these, in the slides themselves, because I think it makes much more efficient way to go through this. And thank you for doing that. The other thing I would ask is you add the, and I know it's kind of crowded, maybe put off to the right, the actual numbers, the actual CPI numbers, so I can look them up in the book.
Oh, okay.
And this is more of a question for Mayor Knapp. So, we've done a lot of work with the sewer, streets and water and stormwater for Charbonneau. And it references the 2014 City Council plan for Charbonneau. I'm assuming that, Mayor Knapp, that the kind of capacity you're putting in there is not something that would incentivize somebody south of there that would, south of Miley Road to say, well, you've got the stuff there, why can't I put in industrial, right? I mean, so I assume that you had to put enough in there to support, obviously replace aging infrastructure, it says that. And I'm sure you had to put some capacity in there for growth, because there's going to be some growth. But, and we don't have to discuss now, we can take it after the meeting if you want, but it's just, with all the, the consternation and it seems like every 3 years we constantly revisit this issue of, trying to expand beyond, south of Charbonneau for industrial land down there. I assumed that somehow the city and the engineers worked all this out where you're providing enough growth for Charbonneau, but not enough that somehow somebody could say, you got enough there, just let me go in and tap into it.
I'm sure the engineers could comment also, but in terms of policy, we are not building excess capacity in that area. The overall project was driven by the fact that Charbonneau's infrastructure is deteriorating earlier or more prematurely than might have been expected, and we have found collapsed pipes there. Engineering department sent cameras down every pipe they could get a camera down and did a very thorough, excuse me, documentation of really what was critical, what was, okay for a while. And that sort of thing. You may know, I probably do, that the Charbonneau Country Club sold the golf driving range and is building houses on the golf range. there because they determined they could alleviate their financial difficulties by selling once more than they could collect from the driving range in 100 years. And so they decided that that was a good move. Counselor's laughing over here because she knows a lot more about it than I do. But no, we're not building excess capacity that in any way would facilitate development beyond the existing growth boundary there.
I thought I'd give you an opportunity to kind of repeat that. So if it gets in a newspaper, if anybody's here who wants to hear it, because you know as well as I do, every 2 or 3 years it keeps coming back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
So our last quadrant was the southwest quadrant, and we have quite a few projects going on at the water treatment plant. We have our life safety seismic upgrades, raw water intake design. We're completing up the water treatment plant surge tank. And probably the biggest project that will be going on is we're actually increasing the capacity of the plant. It's currently at 15 million gallons per day, and we'll be upgrading it to a 20 million gallon per day expansion. And the total cost of these projects for this fiscal year is $3.1 million. Excuse me. We have those poor outfalls, the poor little stormwater fund. Every year it seems like another one of those outfalls pop up that requires a great deal of work. On this one, we have $886,000 budgeted for the work on that particular project. We are allocating funds for both of our bridges. So we're setting aside about $4 million this year for the I-5 pedestrian bridge. And just last week, I wired the money to pay for the purchase of a piece of property here on Town Center Loop. That will be the landing of the bridge, so that will be the welcoming into the Town Center area. We are also on phase 2 of the I-5 undercrossing trail, and we're going to be doing some site-specific site-specific studies at the Boones Ferry Park as per the master plan implementation project. And lastly, I will let Zach talk about our 5th Street to Kinsman.
Yeah, so the 5th Street to Kinsman is that road that kind of relieves pressure from on the Boones Ferry and Wilsonville Road intersection by providing a alternative route connecting Kinsman and 5th Street. And then, so currently that project is finishing up design and acquisition is underway for property needs, and construction is expected to occur in this next fiscal year.
Councilor Stevens.
Thank you. So the phase 1 of the I-5 undercrossing is excellent. And I use that 2-3 times a week, and such a significant difference from what was there. Tell me about phase 2. What are you doing?
So phase 2 is really extending where it currently ends to the so the west side of the improvements.
Okay, so it curves around.
Right, so it'll come back down per the master plan, and be extended about halfway through the park, so.
So are you eliminating the bridge, that little wooden bridge that goes? Okay, so you cross the bridge and then, so it's on the west side of that bridge?
Yes, yeah.
And then continue it through the park. So you're going to do that project before any of the other master plan, any of the other Boones Ferry projects get done?
Right, it's been designed in coordination with the projects that are in the master plan, yeah.
Okay, so that could be put off, because I know we don't have funding for the Boones Ferry master plan projects yet, or we haven't figured that out yet, have we?
Yeah,
No,
this project has been designed even before the Boones Ferry master plan
was done, okay, okay. And the Boones Ferry master plan incorporates where the old trailer park was too?
Yes,
That's all
correct.
considered
Yeah,
Boones
that's
Ferry
where
master
this
plan? Where that trail
extension's
will
going
end
through,
up?
yeah.
Okay, okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All of those water treatment plant projects, including the 20 million gallon per day expansion, then you tell me $3 million. That doesn't sound like that's doing that whole thing.
Yeah, that's just what's
Budgeted for this year.
for this year. So a lot of that is the design work that will begin construction.
So the seismic upgrades is Wilsonville paying for that, or are our big pipe partners paying
That's
for?
for the plant. That's just the plant.
That's
So
just the plant,
The big pipe folks will be paying for the bank stabilization.
not included in this.
Yeah, that's separate, because that's a separate project, and it won't be a city project.
Won't be a city project.
We have no skin in that game.
All right.
We do have skin in the game for the wastewater, or for the water treatment plant, but we also have offsetting revenue from Sherwood as well.
Correct. Yeah, a third of the cost will be paid by.
And the intake, are we sharing that with the big pipe people?
No.
No,
Two.
that's all us?
Well,
They're going to have to.
which, I'm not sure which intake you're talking about.
The raw water intake
Okay, so
design?
the one on here, there's also going to be a project, as you know, it's being surveyed down there right now to put their big pipe in through our linear park. But we will share those costs with Sherwood.
Okay.
So the intake, the raw water intake project is, that's a kind of an opportunity project where we're able to upsize our pumps while the raw water intake is being constructed. So it's kind of our portion of some opportunities to benefit from the construction of that
So
project.
we're oversizing some pumps to meet future demand.
Exactly. Yeah.
Doing it at one time so we don't have to close it down.
Yeah, it wasn't originally slated to happen as soon as we're making it happen.
I'm Patty Nelson, city engineer. So the improvements that are identified are ones that are already planned for in our master plans. It's just the timing, we're speeding up the timing because of the opportunity to do it with the program. So.
Thank you.
Okay. Here is a map of what we anticipate our street maintenance program to take on in fiscal year '20. These, of course, are funded by the street maintenance fees collected on our utility bills. We have some spot work on Day Road and scheduled maintenance on Ellingson and around the Town Center Loop area. And then we have one little spot where we're going to be replacing an asphalt section with some concrete on Burns Way. Another big part of our capital projects, of course, is our master plans and studies. Many of these have been ongoing. Things that have changed is that our citywide signage is now going into the construction plan of the, having finished the actual plan itself. We do have a Charbonneau tree study. We have a water treatment plant master plan that is something new, and also a stormwater outfall plan. So hopefully we can start getting a little ahead of the game on some of these outfalls. We also include some of our information systems projects in our CIPs. The primary one, of course, is our InterSource resource planning software replacement. I know we've been talking about this for a couple of years now, but we really are getting close. We're in contract negotiations now. It comes to us, we do some things, and then it goes back to them, and it takes a while. But the legal department and Andy Stone, our information system director, are working really diligent on this. From the latest we've heard, finance will be gearing up to start the implementation of the financial modules sometime in September or October, so right around the corner. And most of these other projects are just continuations from ones from last year. When we look at the 5-year forecast, you can see that we got a lot of work ahead of us. We have about a $247 million 5-year forecast. A good portion of that are the master plan projects from the parks. It's about $50 million of it. As you can see, as typical, the largest part are related to our construction projects. A lot of projects. When we look at it from a funding strategy, this is where we kind of see a couple of weaknesses. A big portion of that is our SDC eligible, which means there are growth components of the projects that could be paid by SDCs. Unfortunately, we do not have that type of funding available in our SDCs. So we are going to have to come up with a different funding strategies than what was just simply put in our master plans. So one of the other projects that finance will be taking on this year is where we're going to be working with our auditors, and actually, instead of doing a 5-year forecast on our operating fund, we're going to start doing a strategic financial plan, which will not only look at operating needs ongoing, but also the CIP needs, and trying to come up with, a financial plan as, do we consolidate projects to do one large loan, or, different kinds of bonds, and just really kind of get an idea of how we can start planning for this type of engineering projects. I blame it all on them.
So what is the shortfall between what we want from system development funds and what we actually have?
It's pretty short. And it depends on the type. Parks SDCs are probably the least amount of fund balance that we have. I have around $2 million, I believe, is what we're projecting. And there are $50 million worth of park projects for the different master plans that we've completed.
It's a big shortfall.
Yeah, so,
Not all
but
those-
there are other options. I
Right.
mean, we can do a different kind of bonding and things of that sort, and that's what this strategic plan. So going forward next year, as you'll see as we go through, we've kind of dispersed some of our 5-year forecast graphs into this presentation. We won't have that next year. What we plan is in September, after the budget has been adopted, to put together the financial strategic plan, and we'll bring you all back together for one more night of fun and go over just the strategic financial plan.
Councilor Stephen.
So is this information incorporated into the document you gave?
No, because that's
This is
just
totally
operating. Yeah.
different. Yeah, okay. This is just operating. and
Right.
This is capital improvement.
Yeah, on page 168 of the budget document, we do have a summary of all the
All of that
5-year forecasts.
of this.
Yeah, so that's what is driving the graphs, or it comes from this
Okay,
particular
that's where the
information.
detail is, but this is
And-
just operating. Okay,
Correct,
okay.
yes.
Okay, thanks.
And that is the CIP budget. If there's any other questions?
Okay, so two requests, a score update.
Mike? Ooh.
At what point?
The lead evaporated.
Okay, and then bio break. Do we want? Would we like to have a bio break or a break? A cookie break?
Well, now you have,
We have
coming
transit
up,
and
you have
all of the
transit and
public works.
So probably an hour.
Let's take a break.
Okay, take a break till 8,
10-minute break?
Yeah.
how about 11 minutes? But yeah.
11 minutes, all right.
You say 10, it'll be 11.
Waiting for the lights.
We're waiting for a light flash.
She knows.
She does?
Yep. Tell her the recording is going. Oh, the room.
No, the room lights. Oh.
You are on, I don't know why it's not working.
Okay, we're on.
Okay, so now we'll continue with our department presentations. This evening, we will take a look at transportation and public works. We will then recess the meeting until May 28th, where we'll look at the rest of the remaining operating funds. So just to kind of give you an idea of what the format of what we'll be presenting tonight is the same that we used last year. We start out with the amended budget for fiscal year 18-19. We look at the baseline changes, which is what we call the service level. You know, why is the cost going up to have the service on July 1st versus June 30th? So this is what's explained in this area. We've already talked about our wages and our benefits. That's our COLAs, the PERS, and the insurance. So we will highlight if something different is going on in the particular program. But otherwise, you can make the assumption that that's all due to the things that we've already talked about. Excuse me. In Wilsonville, we use a system that we refer to as ad packages, and directors are able, are able to request things that will enhance service or increase service levels or provide better service in some way or another. Of course, I don't think half the people in the room know what a mimeograph machine, but if we were to replace that with a copier, we would anticipate a higher level of service. And those ad packages are presented and are vetted through the city manager before they become a part of the proposed budget. So we'll get on to transportation. Let Keith.
Okay, first up will be SMART, and just to apologize, on page, I think it's page 154 of the SMART budget, the text describing the materials and services did not get updated. That's the text from last year, but in the next few slides, we'll get down there and explain what's going on. And Dwight Brashear, first up, will give us a little bit of a conceptual overview of what's happening in transit.
All right, thank you, Keith. Good evening, committee members. My name is Dwight Brashear. I am the transit director for SMART/Fleet. I need to preference my comments by saying that the scorekeeper that you hired this evening has departed the building. He referenced that he was from the Golden State. And as the score started to shift, he got a bit nervous, so he left. So anyway, also I was challenged to be brief this evening, so are there any questions?
I like this guy. Well done.
All right, so as you've probably heard, there are a lot of exciting things going on in the world of transit, and it has been one of my favorite pastimes for the last now almost 34 years. And so I am very, very excited to talk a little bit about the statewide transportation improvement fund, which is HB 2017. It is going to bring approximately $1.3 million additional dollars annually into the SMART/Fleet budget. We have a very exciting van pool project. We're working with local employers. We are going to underwrite the cost of those van pools using a grant from ODOT. And as you can see there, the first two show a $0 local commitment, and so we're excited about that. The next one is radio replacements. It appears that we are still on the analog system, so Thomas Edison called, he wants it back, and so we are happy to give it to him. However, it is going to cost us approximately $425,000 to do that. The system that we have will be going obsolete probably in the next 12 months. So even if we didn't want to do anything, we would lose radio communication with our bus drivers, and we don't want that to happen. So we will be moving to replace that equipment with new digital equipment at a cost of $106,000 local dollars. Intelligent transportation systems, and that covers a myriad of things that will be happening at the transit center, on the buses with Wi-Fi, at the bus stops with electronic next bus arrival displays and things like that, and automated passenger counters and things like that. So it's just a laundry list, which shows about 39,250 on a local match. And then we are extremely excited about vehicle expansion. So we're going to spend about $1.9 million in vehicles over the next couple of years, and local match will only be $7,800. How do they do it?
How do they do that?
I know that's what you're thinking.
And how do I get you to replace my car?
We are fortunate, going back to the top one, HB 2017 is bringing about $1.3 million into our coffers. And we had an idea, my team and I, and most of them, we have 3 of them here tonight. Ellie at work, who is our grants and programs manager. I have Eric Loomis, who is our operations manager. And then I think way in the back hiding there is Scott Simonton, and he is our fleet manager. And we had an idea that we could use these monies to not only put service out on the street, but to leverage federal grants. And we worked very hard with ODOT and others to make sure that that happened. And once it was in the law, it was in the rules, then we knew that we were setting SMART up to be sustainable long into the future. And that was my primary goal when Mr. Cosgrove and Ms. Troja hired me now 2 years ago. And so we are excited. I think the future is extremely bright for transit here in Wilsonville and beyond, because we do serve communities beyond. And so I couldn't be more pleased to be sitting here presenting this to you. It's a lot different than it was 2 years ago, and the mayor will tell you and others that I was on the hot seat about 2 months after joining SMART. And I had to question my decision, my career decision at that point, but I knew that I had a great team. We built a great team, and we've been able to close that budget deficit and actually create a surplus. So, all right.
So we'll go into a little bit of the detail here, and you can ask questions as they go, or if you have any questions, go ahead and let me know. So as Kathy mentioned, the matrix system we use basically just takes the fiscal year 18-19 budget of 7.6 million, and it kind of works its way down to tell you how they get to the fiscal year 19-20 proposed budget of 8.9 million. The first half of the slide is related to the normal activity, I guess. So we have the wages and benefit true-ups. And a lot of what happens in this fund, as Dwight alluded to, is grant funded. So if they only will have the expense till they have the grant. So if they don't get the grant, then they won't incur the extra expense, especially particularly related to these supplies where it says TDM, integrated grant funded. Those are longstanding grants that the city has had. And so to the extent that they don't incur the expenses, then we wouldn't draw the grant down. But the general gist of what's happening, status quo, is there's commuter rail increase of 3%, which is the amount we pay for TriMet for the commuter rail service. There's additional fleet costs and insurance costs with additional bus purchases. That gets you to the midpoint of that 1.8 million that you have to back off, because that's last year, that's the status quo budget. And then the bottom half is the additional, what's happening with the additional grants in the additional STIF money. So they're hiring four, or they're proposing to hire four additional drivers and one supervisor at $408,000. Materials and supplies is going up. The radio replacements are going into materials and supplies of $196,000. They have this van pool subsidy that is proposed, and that is contracted services, so it goes into the professional tech service line. There's some additional software costs, and then really the bulk of what's happening with a lot of that funding is capital outlay, and Dwight mentioned those projects, $530,000, the $30,000, and then all the buses and equipment of $1.9 million. And that's how, long story, they get to the proposed budget of $8.9 million. So I don't know if we have any more particular questions about the workings of it.
The capital outlay, the software, I'm assuming you're buying the software, but then you have annual fees on top of that. Is that going to come out then in the operating budget?
Well, we also pay those ongoing costs using a grant as well.
Okay.
And so it's usually 80/20. Ellie knows a little better, but the scheduling software, for instance, that we have now is paid, a portion of it is paid, the vast majority of it is paid through a grant.
Okay. Mayor Knapp.
Thank you. Can you help us understand the context of drivers and a supervisor being paid for by grant, and how does that work next year and 5 years from now? And you know, what is that whole expected arc with that?
Yeah, well, HB 2017, now STIF, requires that the money be spent on improving service or enhancing service. In this case, we're adding more service, probably one of the largest service increases that SMART has ever done in a single, in one, fell swoop. And those individuals are being paid for through HB 2017. And so because that is a permanent tax, those monies will always be there as long as we put those in our plan. And we will have performance standards. We're working on those right now so that we can continue to monitor service and move the money where where it would do the best good. So those individuals will be paid for 100% through the STIF money, and our plan has the cost at a fully loaded cost, which includes benefits and fuel, and all of those other things are built into the cost. So we captured all the cost with those with the additional service and supervisors and drivers. And we will have to do a really good job of accounting, because we'll have to, even though, say for instance, we're adding more service on the 1X, and maybe one of those drivers will be operating on the 1X. It will be our job internally to keep track of those hours that are being provided by that particular driver, so we can charge it back to the grant. The beauty of HB 2017 is the money will be, it was, I think, available yesterday.
Yeah, it's fronted to us.
Right, it's fronted to us, and normally grants are reimbursed. So we pay up front, and they reimburse us. In the case of HB 2017, that money is fronted to us, and so it's already there.
Councilor Stevens.
Thank you. So is the van pool concept idea to coordinate mostly assisted living vans with smart transit? And that's not what that's about at all?
No.
Okay.
It's working
Tell me what that
with
is.
local employers.
Oh,
to
employers.
pool their employees together. So say, for instance, they work here and they live in close proximity down in Salem. Then they could take that van and then drive
A smart
to work
van.
together.
Okay.
Not a smart van.
Well, it'll be enterprises.
Right, enterprise rent-a-car.
Oh, okay.
What the grant allows us to do is underwrite the cost of that van pool.
The rental?
To the riders. So instead of, let's say, without the subsidy, it would be $150 per month per person, we might be able to write that down to $75 a month per person on that van, so.
The whole goal is to just get more cars off the
Off
freeway.
the road, right,
That's
right,
the
right.
goal.
So is the group driving it? Is it,
Yeah,
it's
they
it's a
would
van? They would
designate one
a
driver.
Okay,
I don't think there's any special driver's license. that's
okay,
needed.
right. No, that, I would imagine
Right,
insurance.
but one person would be the driver.
Right.
The insurance is all built into it. Enterprise, say for instance, would provide the van. They would
Okay.
service the van. The insurance would be, covered
So-
through Enterprise.
So this grant is facilitating more carpool, a basic, major carpooling
Right,
kind of thing?
exactly
Concept
right.
idea. Okay, so it's employer-based.
Yeah, and we're thinking this will probably 4 to 5 vans this would provide. ODOT, I think, they were interested in us maybe looking at 9 vans, but we'll see how that all
Okay,
works out.
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I had a
We'll do as
totally
many as
different
we
idea of
can.
what this is. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Thanks.
Mr. Bunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 153, supplies, it's gone up 354%.
Yes.
I've kind of read this through a couple times. I can't figure out what that is.
Okay, so the lion's share of that 297,290, if everybody sees, 196,000 of that is that radio upgrade, that analog system that we love so much that we have to let go. 196,000 is contained in there. Also, what we do with that particular account is we put monies in there for present grants and future grants. We're always applying for grants, and all grants require a match. And so we build in a certain amount of money, and Keith can talk a little bit more about it, so that when we are awarded a grant, we have the local match in order to fulfill our obligation to the grant. Grants are competitive in nature, and so unless you can show you have the financial wherewithal, we just bought electric buses that are going to cost about $400,000 local match on a $1.45 million grant. And unless we could show that we can put up that entire almost $1.9 million because it's reimbursed, you're not going to win a grant. So we try to build a certain amount of money into accounts so that we can match these grants.
Can you park it in supplies?
Well, the main delta on that is that 196,000 in radios. I don't know how many radios it is.
The whole fleet plus handhelds and stuff.
Whether or not there might be a decision to make that a capital outlay or not, but right now it's in supplies. So that's the main differential on there. There's a few, like.
But that still leaves 100,000, which is, well, not too bad. It's only about 35,000 over,
Van Pool?
no, I'm talking supplies.
Yeah.
Supplies. The van pools.
86 is Van Pool.
Yeah. Like Dwight said, there is a little bit of kind of unanticipated grant opportunities built in to that. Particularly, we have some outstanding grants that there hasn't been the time to nurture that service, or we have this integrated grant that we've been sitting on for a while that we'll need to either give up that grant at some time or start developing the necessary expenditures to draw it down. Whether that comes in supplies or it comes in as contracted services, perhaps. Don't really know yet. The grant funding is there. We might not know exactly what we're gonna.
So Keith, if you look at 2016-17 actual, and then you go to 2017-18 actual, there's
Right.
just a slight uptick.
Right.
Then it doubles, 2018-19, and then it goes up to a huge number for the projected
Yeah.
next year. So I think the question is why?
And they
I mean,
did,
the 197 for the radios makes complete sense, but why
right, but then that still leaves 100,000.
Right.
So then you subtract last year, which was 65,000, so that's a difference of 35,000 between this year and last year. If you pull out the Yeah, it's fine, that's fine. I was just,
Well, we can, yeah.
it's no
next
big deal,
ti-
it's good.
The detail is that the detail on the slide?
Yeah, on the TDM integrated. It's a little vague, but we can tighten that up and bring it back next time, too.
Oh, I'm sorry. It does say that.
Yeah, and the beauty of it is it's there, but, you know, if we don't have the grant, we don't spend it.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. The other, if I may, Mr. Chairman, follow-up question. So last year, I remember I'm looking at the slide up here, it says commuter rail, 13.3 or 13.4 thousand. And I remember last year, I said, what is that? And if I remember correctly, because we don't pay into TriMet, we have to pay them, that's the money we pay for them to have, for bringing Wes all the way down here, correct? Is that what that the commuter rail thing is for?
The West Line payment, yeah, I'm not sure when does that agreement expire, 2026?
Yeah, I think that's what I recall.
So is that what that 13,352 is for?
That's the change, the actual contract price
That's
is,
the difference, yeah.
yeah, it went up goes up.
It went up that by
It's
that
indexed to
much.
CPI, went up 3%. So the yearly payment is around $347,000.
Oh, my.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, it doesn't say that.
That's just the difference.
Yeah, that's the difference. But it didn't say that in here.
Well, because the 333 is part of that 7.5 baseline.
And not to confuse it, but
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Then add 13 and you get
That's
347.
right.
and we also get money from TriMet because we maintain that parking lot.
Yeah, I was going to say, so, yeah.
There's give and take on.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, where would they be without that lot, without that, we have a lot, we're providing a lot for them down there.
And we
buildings and stuff.
maintain it and, yeah.
Our police maintain that parking lot and everything. All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We keep telling them that. Every time we talk to them.
Mrs. Legarza.
Yes, I have a quick question along the same lines about, I read in the revenue portion of it that we don't receive any revenues from the commuter rail customers. So, and maybe why is that?
Well,
Don't get Dwight going on TriMet.
Okay.
We won't get out of here till 10.
yeah, I think that's, I think that's a valid question. I think, obviously, it was set up before I got here, and I think the people that sat down and negotiated had very good intentions. But I think if we had to do it over again, we probably would look at some other things. But I've ridden the train. I think it's great. It's a great service. I think with some tweaks, it could be better. So
I don't think they generate a lot of fair revenue off that. It's such limited service.
we're working on expanding. The mayor and I
Highly
have been
subsidized.
very vocal on expanding that service.
And it sounds like we actually do get some funds from TriMet themselves
do.
for the
parking
so
lot, yeah.
that technically would be
Yes.
maybe the exchange, okay,
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah. TriMet would like us to pay more. But that's a whole different discussion.
Mr. Park.
Thank you.
Got just two questions. I think you called them, referred to them as STIF funds?
Yes,
that,
STIF,
they're
yes.
going to pay for the additional FTE. Is that a recurring grant, or is that something that's going to be a temporary and that goes away in a couple of years and?
It's not a grant, it's a tax.
It's an ongoing revenue source for the city.
Okay.
It's a payroll tax. So if you ever look at your pay stub, do you work in the Portland metropolitan? I guess it doesn't matter, it's statewide, right?
Statewide.
You're paying that tax.
Okay, I just, when I heard grant, I was thinking,
Right,
okay, that's a
yeah.
one-time
Yeah, not
thing,
grant.
but it's-
It is marked grant
It's
funded.
a
on
new
here.
revenue source for the city.
Yeah.
Okay. One other question, just I want to make sure I kind of understand what I'm looking at. When it has the capital outlay and it has the negative 2.157 million deduction, does that represent buses that we funded and then we reimburse those funds? Or is that What exactly am I looking at?
That's a
when I
little
see that?
mechanism of this matrix backing off. Those are the buses we're purchasing this year. So it doesn't inflate the budget next year. So we back that off, and then the buses that we're going to purchase next year are the
1.89.
1.8 million, yeah. So, I have to say, they received a tremendous amount of grants in this current fiscal year.
Yeah.
So the grant delta, or even the intergovernmental delta for next year doesn't seem as large, but it's because this year's grant funding was pretty large in itself, including is it 1.4 million electric bus? or
1.45, yeah.
That I understand is going to be delivered on Monday, is that true?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then there's some kind of open house on that too.
Yeah, we have a big celebration coming up in June. Yeah.
June 26th.
Yes.
So it'll be one of the first large electric buses in Portland metro area.
Yeah, we're one of the first, and probably the smallest across the nation to be given this type of grant. It's a major undertaking between the buses and the infrastructure that's required to charge them. And so small agencies, like SMART, aren't usually given this opportunity. But Scott and I and the team are going to make sure this works, and it works well. So we're excited about it.
Thank you.
Councilor Eckerval.
I wonder if you could just briefly tell us about the trolley, the CNG trolley, what the plans are for that. I know we've had a trolley that's like seasonal and special events. Will it be something similar? Will it be on a fixed route?
Okay, yes. As you know, we have a trolley. The trolley now is probably close to 20 years old, 18, 19 years old. And it is really a fair weather trolley, meaning when the weather is nice, you get in the trolley. If it's raining or something like that, you don't want to ride it. So our thought is to keep the open air trolley because we really think it speaks to who and what we are here in Wilsonville. But we thought we would buy a trolley, all-weather trolley. And so this is a CNG trolley that has windows that can come out, but we would keep them in for the most part. And I think the citizens of Wilsonville would really, really enjoy that. And then the other trolley, which the kids absolutely adore, especially the small kids, we would use for special events at schools and things like that.
So we'll still have both of them then functioning.
That's the plan. And just for an update, because we've been getting a lot of calls on the current trolley, is that the technicians are going through it to make sure that, because it was in storage for several months, as we do, and it's in the garage now, and they're going through it, shining it up really nicely, and it should be ready in, we figure, about a week, I think. Scott, is that? About a week, so the citizens of Wilsonville can expect to see their trolley on the street here in about a week. So, yeah, and we'll use, as far as your question, folks really like us to use it on crosstown routes, and so we will, as Scott sees fit, he will, put those trolleys into service on the crosstown route.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the next slide is fleet, which also falls under the transportation umbrella. And then after we do fleet, we'll touch base again with transit on their 5-year forecast of projected revenues and expenses. Fleet is an internal service fund, so these charges are costed out to any department that has a vehicle. 80% of it is actually picked up by the transit department itself. The fuel costs for the city are captured in here, all the vehicle maintenance, the tires, and all that kind of activity, as well as within our fleet charge to the departments, we also charge out a replacement component of the fleet charge. So the vehicles that get approved through capital outlay going forward have a reserve component built in. So when the 10-year period, we generally keep our vehicles for 10 years, expires, and we have the funding source to purchase those vehicles. So what's happening this year, the fleet department is requesting a tire machine replacement or a tire machine replacement, $13,500, as well as those vehicles that have served their lifespan or equipment, which we also include equipment in our reserve that we build up every year, and that's at $149,000. So that is the fleet department, if anybody has any questions explicitly on that. Otherwise, we can roll into the 5-year forecast slide for transit. So this is the transit financial forecast in a graphical presentation. You see it in 2019-20 peaks, or perhaps peaks, beyond, but because beyond that, I really don't know what our grants awards will be. So for the forecast of the 5 years, we kind of like, we averaged the amount of grants we received for the past 5 years, and we use that as a basis going forward, because we don't really know what our grant funding will be. But this 5-year forecast does have the the recurring STIF funding that we're going to be receiving, which is $1 million.
1.3.
1.3 in the regular formula type we're going to get. And then within the STIF program, there are additional grant opportunities that we can also apply for grants within the STIF. So there's money available, we just don't know. It's competitively, we have to be competitive and bid for it. The 5-year forecast too also, for the payroll tax that is the original source of funding, or is the main source of funding for this department, we typically, we're estimating future wage-based growth at 2%. That's probably really conservative. You look at the CPI wage earnings, that index is usually a couple points higher, but there's companies coming and going. There's the composition of jobs that are here changing or, in flux. So we just take the wage base that we have and index it by 2%. So all along with the STIF funding and its corresponding service increases, revenue and expenses should match for the next 5 years, basically what this forecast is showing. And then we have a healthy reserve, and then we are meeting the bottom line is the minimum required reserve outlined in our financial policies. So we're meeting the reserve and beyond that, and we expect the revenues and expenses of this fund to be in sync for the next 5 years. And that, if you have any more questions for Dwight, otherwise we can move on to Public Works.
Thank you. Yes.
Not yet, anyway. Not yet. Thanks.
12 seconds left.
Thank you. So as we go into our Public Works program areas, we have Delora Kerber, our Public Works Director, with us. We have asked each of the departments to put together a slide with information that will be of interest to the Budget Committee. Dwight's was about the grants. As you can see from the number of program areas here at the Public Works, they have such a large part of the budget, we actually gave them 2 slides. We'll let her talk about those.
Good evening. I'm Delora Kerber, Public Works Director, and here with me in the back is I have Matt Baker, Facilities Supervisor, and Preston Langelier, Roads and Stormwater Supervisor, and Ian Glidis, our Utilities Supervisor. Martin Montalvo, our Operations Manager, is out for a couple days on military active duty, so he couldn't be with us tonight. But so basically, just wanted to share with you Public Works. And so we are the ones responsible for the operation and maintenance of the city's infrastructure. The planning department plans, the engineering group designs and get it built, and then they turn it over to us to take care of and preserve on behalf of all the citizens in the city. Another function of our department, it has to do with many health and safety regulations, especially having to do with the water and or the wastewater treatment plant. We have to follow various state and federal regulations for those. And another element of what it is that we do is emergency management and preparedness. And we like to think of Public Works, we are another first responder. And so staff is always on duty 24/7, 365 to take care of whatever issues there may be in the city. So I won't read the slide to you, don't worry. Just some statistics I have for each of the various divisions. But so the Public Works Administration is the department that gives the overall management and administrative support to the rest of the divisions within the department. Our facilities division is responsible for maintaining all the city's buildings and grounds. And recently, we've also taken over the responsibility of providing janitorial services. Our roads department covers all the things within the right-of-way, be it streets, sidewalks, ADA ramps, signs, signals, all of those. We take care of thermoplastic and/or paint stripes. We have the street lighting as part of that. It's its own standalone fund. And then for the water system, we have both treatment and distribution. As was mentioned earlier, we have Veolia Water. It maintains our operates and maintains our water treatment plant on our behalf. And then we have City Crew, who takes care of all the distribution lines. And with that, and so that's where one of the regulations come in, is we need to do testing on a regular basis to provide proof to the city and the citizens, all that we're providing high quality water, drinking water. And then we have the industrial pre-treatment. That division is one that helps prevent the transmission of pollutants into our waste stream that goes to the wastewater treatment plant. And they work with businesses and multifamily facilities, as well as we have certain discharge permittees within the city. Then we have our wastewater system, which is both collections and treatment. Treatment is provided by Jacobs on our behalf. And then our staff takes care of the sewer treatment lines and the manholes throughout the city. And then we also, the last one is our stormwater division. And that is the stormwater division helps take care of the infrastructure for stormwater to help preserve both roads, properties, as well as the environment. There you go.
Thank you. So first, we'll take a look at the administration program. It starts with a budget of $628,000 in fiscal year 18-19. The baseline changes are about $44,000, mainly through our personnel services. We do have one ad package, and that is for the replacement of the city's emergency radios, and I believe it's for the same
It is. It's the same one as that Transit had talked about, and so these are the complementary ones for the Public Works Department.
And so we end up with a proposed budget of $727,000. Looking at our facilities program, it was about halfway through the fiscal year when the decision was made to stop using an outside service for our janitorial service and to bring it in-house. So you'll see that the baseline changes is significant for the personnel services, and that's because the supplemental budget adjustment was for 4 months of these 3 employees, and this, of course, the whole fiscal year is for the 12 months. So that's where the big change came in. And we're also seeing some increases because of the supply for the janitorial services as well. We do have a couple of ad packages, some different computer systems that will help streamline certain jobs that they have to take care of, the document management. They have all of the warranties and instruction manuals for all of the different things that they install in the various buildings. And on-call architectural services, our facility group is often asked upon to move walls to make more space for offices like here in City Hall, and it's gotten to the part where we do have to have some architectural drawings sometimes because there's different kind of electrical issues and things like that. And end up with a budget of $1,283,000.
Mr. Bunn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a real quick question for council. or maybe it came from the city manager. What was the factor behind, that was kind of unusual to go from outsourced to in-house. What drove that? Was it the service? Or I can't imagine it was cheaper to bring it in. Was it just a lack of, was there security?
Actually, I think we are saving money by bringing it in, but that wasn't the driving factor.
The driving factor was the quality of service, and we had been struggling with the provider. The state requires public agencies to use what they call a qualified rehabilitation facility that helps disadvantaged people to employ them. We were having difficulty. We would meet with them on a regular basis. We were not getting any traction in making changes. So we ran the analysis of how much we needed to pay them versus if we brought it in-house and bought equipment. And the first year, we actually are very close to breaking even, and that's with including all the capital outlay we needed to do, like purchasing a new van and other equipment. But the projection is from the second year on out that actually we would be paying out less money than we would if we stayed with the contractor.
Which is interesting considering how tight the labor market is, that you can pull that off. But you're saying that the state requirement was that they had to be of a certain disability class?
They had to be a qualified rehabilitation facility, and which provides jobs to disadvantage, be it mental or physical disability. And so the state actually was the one that would approve. They were the ones that dictated the price we had to pay. So it wasn't like a open market bidding process.
Right.
It was, here's one of 6 companies, you need to pick them. They give you a price, we, the state, approve it, and you, agency, gets to pay whatever price we think is reasonable. So the price was a bit higher, I believe, than we would have gotten had we gone with a private contractor.
Oh. And so are we still meeting that commitment to bring those kind of people on board?
No, so the state rule is if you're going to contract, you need to use a QFR.
Right.
And the only way to not use a QFR is if you're doing the work yourself in-house.
Oh, okay.
Councilor Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, just to add on to that, I think one of the other issues that was the quality of the service. The council took this very seriously, and we talked about it a lot. And it, reports from staff from, I think, over a lengthy period of time from many, many people about and I think staff tried to address those issues over and over and over again, and it just wasn't working anymore. So that
We
was.
actually have a quite an extensive slideshow that Mr. Baker could show you of food stains that had not been removed for several months that had turned into mold, and anyway.
It was an issue for us.
It was mostly a
health
lack
issue.
of supervision.
Yes.
Yeah. So it wasn't just a monetary decision either. It was, yeah.
I didn't think so.
No. And it wasn't a decision taken lightly, but I don't think it was a decision taken lightly at all.
No.
And we talked about it quite a bit.
No,
So it
no.
was the right thing to do, I think.
No, thank you.
Councilor Eckerval.
Just to jump in on that conversation, I think that was one of the more memorable PowerPoint presentations that council has seen in this past year. It definitely left an impression with all of us. But I think, viewing some of the images of what was, happening in the facilities that are public facilities too,
Right.
Restrooms that we expect are
Yes.
public to use. And I think there is a concern about safety and health for people using that. And, so that definitely was a factor in looking at what kind of service
Right.
we're providing for the community too.
Yeah, I suspected all that, but I was just curious, that's all.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
So moving on to our road operating fund, we start with a budget of $955,000. In this particular budget, we're going to be reallocating some of the supervisor time. After he'd been here for a while, he realized he was spending more time in some of the other programs. So we're kind of trying to true it up to where each fund is paying for the portion of his time. We removed about $51 million from one-time capital costs from last year, so there's an actual reduction of $84,000 in the baseline. One of the more, I think, memorable or wanted programs for the ad packages is the street tree infill program. That's something that has been going on for a while. And we end up with a proposed budget of $899,000. Question on roads? Okay, moving on to street lighting.
Oh, she has a question here.
Yes?
Just a quick question, and I'm back to funding, I'm sorry. But I had a quick question on the funding for, it looks like the road operating fund, which would go into this program, I'm kind of assuming. But we collect vehicle licensing fees from Washington County.
Correct.
But it didn't mention anything about Clackamas County.
We have not budgeted for Clackamas County because we haven't really gotten a firm date as to when that is going to go into effect. But the collection for Washington County began July 1st. So we are receiving those funds now.
Great, and then we would anticipate, it sounds like.
Correct.
Awesome.
Yeah, so next year, we're hoping to have that in there. We did not include it in the 5-year forecast either, just because we don't really know yet what will be happening.
Fantastic, thank you.
Our street lighting fund, of course, the big charge on that one, is electricity costs, and we expect about a $14,000 increase, ending with a proposed budget of $374,000. Looking at our water distribution, these are the program that takes care of the water pipe system, starting out with a $1.5 million budget. Through all the different changes in baseline, we have an increase about $50,000. And I'm sure the one that jumps out most, at least it does to me, is once again, we see those nasty bank fees being increased. And so we did take time last year after the budget committee and to look at it. What we saw was a significant increase when we started a program of allowing people to make a recurring credit card payment. So these people go out onto the website, set up their account, put in their credit card, and automatically they're paid every month. It's from there, it feeds right into our system, so we don't have to handle it. So yes, we are paying higher for somebody else to do the processing, but we're not having to take staff time to handle it at all. Looking over the 3 funds that this affects, we're paying about $300,000 in bank fees, but we're also collecting about $24 million in the rate charges. So it's about 1% of the cost of what we receive will go towards the bank fees. So anyway, it's still there. On top of that, that was also a period of growth where, I mean, every year we're adding 300 or 400 accounts, and I think this is just a really popular way for people to pay their bills. So that's how that is working. And so the total for the proposed budget of fiscal year 19 is $1,566,000.
Mr. Amidon.
So how do other municipalities handle bank fees? Because I've seen a lot of options where you just, it's $1.25, $1.50 to pay it on a credit card.
Yeah.
I mean,
and we certainly have that ability to put in a service fee. The philosophy that we have always lived by, if you will, in the finance department is our goal is to turn off service to the smallest number of people possible. We have about 6,700 accounts, and we usually get that down to about 20 by the end of the month. And that's because we have all of these various payment options. So, that's give and take. We charge a service charge for our municipal court, and we have very few people use that system to pay for their charges. So, some people don't like, of course with the court it's a little bit different because you get charged for every ticket, and often you'll get pulled over because you have a tail light out, but then you won't have your registration and your driver's license expired, and so you could have 3 or 4 citations, so you would have 3 or 4 different service fees. But it's very insignificant, the number of people that use that online system for the municipal court, and that's the one that we charge the direct fee for.
But the question is, how, does Canby, Lake Oswego, Tiger, Tualatin?
Every city has a different philosophy on those fees.
Right.
Some seek to limit them to the greatest extent possible, and others, like Kathy just explained, we tend to be a little more, we try to offer as many options as we can for people to pay their utility bills. I don't know that I have a good answer for you. I don't think every city's the same when it comes to this. I think there's a spectrum of answers that I could probably give you.
I guess the point is, at some point, $500,000 becomes $500,000. It's $300,000 today. Frog Pond comes on, blah, 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 blah. It's going to be $500,000 of, in my opinion, lost opportunity cost. And as long as you're looking at it, that's okay. But what I don't like is that's what we've always done. I don't like that response. It's kind of like,
I mean, I guess, we could certainly, I know this would, would come from the budget
Yeah,
committee or for
that's
city
all.
council, if they wanted to try different programs, we could certainly do that. But, like I said, on the opposite end of that is that we're not having to touch any of those payments. So if we eliminate that particular program, and they do regular credit charge, then we're having to run that through the credit card machines ourselves. So, I mean, there's a give and take on, do we need another person or two, or do we do this? The best thing it would be is everybody would use our lockbox, and that's a bargain. That's a really great service. But, unfortunately, people don't write checks and mail them off that much anymore. So we can, it's certainly something that we can look into, but that would definitely be a change in the philosophy that we've had, so. Not that that's impossible to change, but.
and I don't mean to harbor on it, we're running out of time, but last year was the first year for me on this committee, and bank fees, bank charges were a big discussion point. And this year, again, we just kind of increased in $25,000 in bank fees for this one fund, and that's just the way we're going to do it. It's okay as long as we're thinking about it. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I would just add, there is no cost to the city if somebody does a debit out of their checking account that's
Very minimal,
very minimal.
and that's
And
another
that's,
one.
because this is credit, and that's
Right.
just a debit out of the card.
And
So-
we have that option as well.
you have that option, right.
People,
And is that a work, not heavy, but does that require staff time?
it does, we do have to actually create
Go
the
in and
file
create, yeah.
and send it to the bank
Okay.
once a month. It's not a big process.
okay.
When it's sent to the lockbox, they send us a file, which then we have to upload and,
So
account
there's
for.
always staff time involved, where the credit card does not require any staff time, it's just.
Correct. When it goes through the website.
It just posts right to the account.
Correct. We do take credit cards over the phone, especially on shut-off days, things of that sort.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So, like I said, we've always
Wanted
tried
to make sure
to do
people, so you don't
things
have to
as much
shut the
as we
service off.
can to
Yeah, okay.
keep that down. Looking at the water treatment plant, the big driver here is that our granulated activated charcoal, our GAC, we see quite often in our budgets from year to year. Starts out with a beginning balance of almost $4 million. The baseline changes is about $733,000. Every year with the water treatment plant, as it ages, we're seeing more and more annual repairs or replacements to existing pieces of equipment. Last year, we had about $687,000. This year, we'll have about $534,000. For a total of $3,777,000. Looking at the wastewater pretreatment, this is a pretty small budget. Starts out with $133,000, got about a $6,500 increase due to our normal increases in our salaries, and a proposed budget of $139,391. Our wastewater treatment plant, it starts out with a $2.7 million budget. Baseline changes is primarily due to our annual contract increase. We do have one replacement of a pump number 1 for $24,000 with an ending proposed budget of $83,170.
Mrs. LaGarza.
Thank you. I had just a quick question about the reuse pump. Just reuse in general? Is that an on-site reuse
It is an
activity?
on-site reuse,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
And it'll help expand the capacity of the plant for being able to move the water around within the plant.
Thank you.
Our wastewater collection, we start out with a beginning budget of $953,000. We have about $35,000 in our baseline changes with a proposed budget of about $989,000. For our stormwater, we're seeing 0.05 of the road supervisor being added to this particular program, so you'll see a slight increase in personnel services. One thing that we did this year is that we gave each line item for every operating budget their 3-year average expenditure per line item. So you'll see in a lot of the budgets there, in between are going up and down, and that was as people were going through and trying to reallocate what was actually being spent in the correct line items, and I think this is a good example of one of those. Overall, we see a baseline change of about $93,000, and we have a proposed budget of $802,339.
Councilor Ackerval.
I had a question, which you responded to, thank you very much, really about some of the information that's on page 140. And just to kind of follow, I guess I'll restate my original question, and then we can hear a little bit all about the response, and then to follow up on it too. My original question was about, on that page 140, I noticed that at the top, it's talking about the goal of cleaning 33% of public catch basins annually. And then in the text below, also kind of talking about similar, like about 30% cleaning. And then when I'm looking at what the actual or what the estimate has been for the last couple of years, as well as what the forecast is for 2019-20, the forecast is at 27%. And you'll be able to explain this better than my quick understanding from this text here, but it sounds like some of this is driven by the vacuum truck, which is in hot demand. Is that is that really kind of what it comes down to? And made me wonder, do we not have the resources then to meet some of these goals because the vacuum truck is in such hot demand? Or can you help explain that a little bit more?
Sure.
Yeah.
So right now, and it will be one of those things that maybe next year we'll be back to ask for another vacuum truck. But so right now we have a large one, and the majority of the time it's spent on cleaning the sewer system. But we are able to take it away and from that use and use it for the stormwater at least once a week. And the other piece of equipment that we currently use for our stormwater is this small little tow behind. It's called a ditch witch. It's this orange little trailer thing. And what we're finding is, as the city's growing and more catch basins are out there, they're getting a little bit more sophisticated, deeper, is that the little tow behind trailer is not working for us. And, it's working, but it's not working as efficiently because it's so small. What we end up doing is cleaning a couple catch basins and hauling it over and dumping it and coming back and back and forth. Okay. So we just are realistic in recognizing that we likely won't hit the goal of 30 or 33% at this juncture. So.
Is there long-term effects for not,
Well, I mean, we
like,
still
will we
do-
slip
I
and
mean,
fall
we-
behind and have greater expense in the future because we're not taking care of things as we should?
So we make a point of hitting at least 25% of our high priority catch basins. We know where the hot spots are, and then per the permit, the MS4 permit, is we also ideally go through the rest of the catch basins throughout the city within a 4-year cycle. So there's a certain amount of, could be deferred maintenance, but we are taking care of business of all the really important ones. And then as you see in this budget here is we're asking for another 27,000 to help supplement, if need be, to be able to hire a third party to come out and help us with some of the more challenging,
I see.
cleaning.
Okay. And the vacuum truck, I feel like that was a kind of a recent purchase, right?
It was, I think it's
Yeah.
2 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
So like, wasn't it like $400,000 or something? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the problems with the stormwater fund is that it has limited resources, and it keeps, there's this constant, war, if you will, between the operating needs and the capital needs every time we have one of these.
Capital's
outfalls.
winning.
And right now, the capital's winning.
You know, because you've had to sit through presentations about outfall, emergency outfall repairs.
Exactly,
and
yeah.
Drone video, you know?
Yeah.
For next year, 4 years ago, they borrowed $3 million from the general fund, and they will be paying that off next year. So what we anticipate is having another $3 million infusion into the fund where we can get caught up on some of these things that have been on the back burner, plus hopefully move forward with some of the different capital projects that we have.
Okay. Okay, thank
Constant
you.
juggling act.
Yeah, thank you for that information.
At our wastewater collection, we start out with a $953,000 budget. We have about $35,000 in changes. Once again, a good portion of that's bank charges. We end up with a proposed budget of about $989,000.
Question? Do you have a question?
I think she's trying to.
Yeah, I think you just click it and leave it
Oh.
on. Yeah.
Yes,
about
go ahead.
Thank you. Just another quick question. I'm back to the funding on this. I noticed when I was reading through the funding that the treatment facility is designed, and maybe this isn't, but I saw wastewater collection, so I thought I'd go there. It's designed to handle 2.7 MGD, and then during dry weather, and then during wet weather, it's designed to handle 3.8 MGD. Why is that?
Because what happens is you have inflow and
Infiltration.
infiltrate, thank you. It's getting late. Infiltration during the wet weather. And so what we recognize is though the amount of your solids and organics remains the same, the vast volume of water increases.
Stormwater.
So the treatment plant is sized to be able to take on additional volume of water.
Okay.
That's
And
what
actually,
happened
it's
in
rated
Portland.
at 4 million MGD.
And then it is all infiltration and things of that nature, and it's not any do we have any cross connections?
We do not.
Okay.
Our storm and our sewer are totally separate.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Oh, we already talked about stormwater. Did
I think
put
we
that
did.
into twice?
Maybe we didn't.
Okay.
I think we did.
Thought we had to.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, somehow or another, I got a little trigger happy with my
I think we
finger
went
there.
backwards
and
to
went up.
collections.
But anyway, the good news is that was the last of the Public Works, and the last of our presentations. It looks like you're going to have to spend the night here at your office. Ready to drive home.
No.
We have to have a score update, I'm sorry.
They lost by 3.
No!
Well, see, I saved you guys, right? I mean, you would have been so upset had you
Yeah,
been
you've been
home
watching that game at home, throwing stuff at the TV anyway.
Save my language.
TV sets. Anyway, thank you very
Bummer.
much, and then turn it back to you to,
Thank you. This meeting is recessed to the second meeting scheduled for May 28th, 2019.